Chapter 643. June 14th, Port Berbera. The Alliance Fleet and Shanghai City's Ocean Fleet gathered at the port, preparing to exterminate the pirates. The Alliance Fleet had more than 200 warships, 20,000 NPC sailors provided by the feudal lords, and 40,000 adventure-type players. The Cheetah Mercenary Group alone had 10,000 of them. The two fleets docked side by side at the port, proving the saying, "There is no harm without comparison." Before this, the Somali feudal lords had thought that their warships were not bad, but now they felt ashamed. How embarrassing! Some feudal lords sighed. According to the original plan, the 40,000 adventure-type players would be scattered on the 200 warships of the Alliance Fleet. Seeing the warships of the Ocean Fleet, Farah hoped that the Ocean Fleet could carry a group of adventure-type players. "What do you think, Marquis?" Farah asked. "Sure." Ouyang Shua nodded calmly. Because of the Tita incident, the other Somali guilds had a grudge against the Ocean Fleet. Even if they envied the majestic warships of Shanghai City, they were not willing to fight on the same ship as the Shanghai City Navy. Helpless, Farah could only place the 10,000 people of the Cheetah Mercenary Group on the Ocean Fleet. Seeing this, a strange light flashed in Ouyang Shua's eyes. At 11 a.m., the Alliance Fleet set sail on time. There were 3 large pirate groups active in the Gulf of Aden. The Sirius Pirate Group was the largest pirate group in the Gulf of Aden. Their leader was called Ephia. They were well organized and had a strict hierarchy. They mainly robbed merchant ships. The livestock exported from Somalia were often extorted by this pirate group. The Bertram Pirate Group was the earliest pirate group in the Gulf of Aden. Their leader was called Puntland. Their equipment was rather outdated, and they were the weakest of the 3 pirate groups. They mainly robbed small fishing boats. The Plum Blossom Pirate Group was the most vicious pirate group in the Gulf of Aden. Their leader was called Merka. They were well equipped, but they were ugly. They robbed every ship they saw, even the feudal lords' warships. The 3 pirate groups had a total of more than 60,000 soldiers. It was almost impossible to take them all down. In addition, the 3 pirate groups had formed a tacit understanding with each other. They each divided their territory and did not move together. Therefore, the Alliance Fleet planned to take them down one by one. This time, their target was the Sirius Pirate Group. According to the intelligence of the Somali players, the Sirius Pirate Group had more than 25,000 people and more than 150 ships of various sizes. Their lair was built on a mysterious island named Heavenly Wolf Island. The Sirius Pirate Group protected their base very well. Even the other 2 pirate groups didn't know the exact location of Sirius Island was. The Allied forces were naturally confident in their plan to encircle and suppress the pirates. They had already grasped the location of Celestial Wolf Island. This time, they were heading straight for it. Take down Sirius Island. This was the goal of the Somali players. After the fleet set sail, Ouyang Shua called Zheng He and Chun Damong to the command room. Not only was Ouyang Shua heavily injured, but Chun Damong was also pushed out of the corpses by the divine martial guards. If Chun wasn't, he was Chun, he would have died on Star. Sirius Fleet, Chun to come up, and Chun, Fleet, come and Chun. "What do you think of Farah?" Ouyang Shua asked. "Fong." Chun Damong's eyes widened in disdain. He gritted his teeth and said, "In this general's opinion, he's a complete hypocrite. He's so cruel to his companions. Having to be a good person." Looking at him smile, this general felt a little scared. He must have deliberately leaked the Marquis's whereabouts that night. The Marquis suspects this person as well? Zheng He thought further. More or less. If that's the case, why did the Marquis allow them to board the ship? Zheng He was puzzled. Ouyang Shua took a deep breath and slowly said, "The territory has spent countless resources on this voyage, and it's not just to reach the destination. The purpose of this voyage was to establish a safe and reliable route in the sea along the way. Conquering Star Nation is for this reason, and assisting the Somali players to encircle and annihilate the pirates is also for this reason. Somalia is located at the mouth of the Gulf of Aden, and its strategic location is also very crucial. If we can establish a permanent stronghold here, it will be of great significance to open up the Grand Line. If that's the case, why don't you mobilize the army and conquer Somalia? Chen Daming interrupted. Ouyang Shua shook his head. With the strength of the four great naval fleets of Qing Shanhai City, it's not impossible for them to attack Somalia with the proper tactics. But sometimes, starting a war is the last resort. The destruction of Star Nation has already attracted the attention of the world's feudal lords. If Somalia also falls, then Qing Shanhai City's behavior will be too ugly, and it will cause the other countries along the way to unite against the enemy. If that happens, I'm afraid that the ocean-going fleet will not be able to reach England smoothly. Haven't we talked about ocean-going trade? This, with Chen Daming's brain, how could he understand all these twists and turns? Zheng He had some understanding and said, therefore, the Marquis's true intention is to completely gain the trust of the Somali players, to let them take the initiative to allow us to establish a permanent base here. Ouyang Shuan nodded in appreciation. He had said a lot of things with the intention of enlightening Zheng He. As the commander-in-chief of the Nanyang Navy, if he did not have an international strategic thinking, he would not be able to keep up with the development of the times. In addition to their original abilities, the terrifying growth talent of historical officials and generals was also a precious asset. They also had high growth potential. Otherwise, why would they be so precious? Gaia created a large number of historical officials and generals and gave them advanced intelligence. Its purpose was not to create a group of rigid artificial intelligences. Gaia's true purpose was to let historical officials and generals interact with the feudal lords to evolve once again. Otherwise, what use would it be if they materialized on Hope Planet in the future? Then, how should we deal with the Inhumans on the ship? Zheng He asked. Ouyang Shua already had a plan in mind. Stay alert. If the enemy doesn't move, I won't move. Understood. Zheng He and Chen Daming nodded in unison. Ouyang Shua could not explain the matter of the traitor in detail, so he could only adapt to the situation. Since things had developed to this point, Ouyang Shua naturally could not give up halfway. If he wanted to act, he had to be thorough. The next morning, Sirius Island was already in sight. Looking down from the sky, Sirius Island looked like a huge wolf's head embedded in the blue sea. There was a mountain on the island, and a huge flag with a wolf's head was hanging on the mountain. It was their pirate flag. As their headquarters, how could the Sirius pirates not arrange for external security? As soon as the Alliance fleet approached the nearby waters, they were discovered by the scouts and fired a signal flare. The black signal flare rose into the sky, and the naval battle began. Those with good eyesight could see that the pirate flag on the mountain on the island was being waved forcefully. Instantly, the entire island was in an uproar. It was as if they had been looking forward to this battle for a long time. At the same time, red signal flares rose from the mountain and exploded in the sky. Facing the small fries on the periphery, the ocean fleet did not even bother to make a move. They were all left to the Alliance fleet. The Somali adventurers were unusually excited about killing these outlying outposts. It was as if they could already see the dawn of victory. When the Alliance fleet was about to approach Sirius Island, a huge black fleet came from afar. Every warship in the fleet was hung with a pirate flag. The black warships were painted garishly. There were skulls, swords, demons, sea beasts, and other graffiti. It was like a different kind of art exhibition. The Sirius pirates had made their move. Without a doubt, this was a very strange naval battle. Both sides had made their moves and unexpectedly met on the surface of the sea. The Alliance fleet players looked at each other. Logically, even if the outlying outposts had discovered the fleet, they would not be able to set sail so quickly. No matter how well-trained they were, they would need at least half an hour to assemble. No matter how they looked at it, it felt like the other party was waiting for them at the port. What was supposed to be a sneak attack had suddenly turned into a head-on encounter. However, at this critical juncture, there was no time for them to think carefully. Let's fight! Compared to the ASEAN Navy, both the Alliance fleet and the pirates were equipped with a small number of firearms. Small firearms and heavy cannons were already installed on their main warships. Therefore, at the beginning of the war, it was a battle of cannons. Open fire! The rumbling sound of cannons exploded on the surface of the sea, creating huge waves. The warships that were hit basically only had the fate of sinking. The most eye-catching performance on the battlefield was naturally the ocean fleet. A large number of cannons, well-trained navy, coupled with a reasonable battle formation and brilliant command, caused the pirates on the opposite side to suffer. As such, the morale of the Alliance fleet was greatly boosted. For the first time, the Somali players had a good impression of the ocean fleet. The two fleets fired at each other as they quickly approached each other. After all, cannons were rare and were only the appetizer of the naval battle. The real cruel battle was still the boarding battle. The strange thing was that both sides had the request for boarding battle. For pirates, boarding battle was their best combat method, so it was understandable. What about the Alliance fleet? Don't forget, there were 40,000 adventure-type players in their main force. If they didn't engage in a boarding battle, these adventure players were nothing more than decorations. The screaming adventure-type players wished they could immediately jump onto the pirate ship and fight to the death with them. During the whole process, only the ocean fleet was still constantly using cannons to fight back. One pirate ship after another was sunk, and countless pirates fell into the sea like dumplings. The warships of both sides were getting closer and closer. Those with good eyesight could already see the ferocious faces of the enemies on the opposite warships. Hatred and killing intent were constantly gathering. At this moment, behind the Alliance fleet, two huge fleets suddenly appeared like ghosts. Chapter 644. The Alliance fleet and the Sirius pirates were fighting fiercely when the Thuron pirates and Plum Blossom pirates suddenly appeared behind the Alliance fleet and surrounded it. The conspiracy from his previous life was playing out again. No matter how slow the Somali players were, they knew that they had fallen into a trap. This was not an encirclement of pirates. It was the three pirate groups encircling the players. The roles of the hunter and the prey switched instantly. Everyone, don't panic. Shrink the formation and move closer to the ocean fleet. Zheng He tried to take over the command of the fleet and sent flag signals to the Alliance fleet. Some of the warships received the command and moved closer. Some were already in chaos and had completely lost order. Some saw the command but ignored it. The sea was in chaos. Hundreds of warships shuttled back and forth in the gunfire, and they could crash into each other if they were not careful. The sounds of cursing, gunfire, killing, and crying for help intertwined together, making people's heads swell. At this critical moment, the difference between the regular army and the Inhuman army was vividly shown. The warships, mainly made up of NPC sailors, chose to move closer to the ocean fleet. The battleships made up of players charged at the pirate ship, hoping to fight for a chance of survival. In less than 20 minutes, the three pirate groups had successfully surrounded the Alliance fleet. In an instant, countless zip lines, hooks, and planks were placed on the warships of the Alliance fleet. The cruelest and bloodiest boarding battle had finally begun. Because the warships were too densely packed, even if the ocean fleet wanted to open fire, they could easily hit their allies. Helpless, they could only accept the boarding battle. Thousands of strangely dressed pirates either used zip lines or stepped on planks, waving the machetes in their hands and letting out strange whistles as they charged toward the warships. The adventurer players on the warships didn't want to be outdone and charged forward with their swords. At this time, they had no time to care about the entire battle or the fate of the Navy. The only thought in his mind was to hack these damned pirates to death. The sounds of killing filled the entire sea, forming a vast and majestic picture of a naval battle. The ocean fleet naturally became the main target of the pirates. Unfortunately, they were destined to make the wrong move. The sword and shield soldiers and archers of Shanghai City weren't rookies, especially the soldiers of the ocean fleet. Most of them had been tempered by the national war and were getting more and more mature. How could ordinary pirates be a match for them? The ocean-going fleet became the most difficult bone for the pirates to chew. The corpses of the pirates spread out on the deck at a speed visible to the naked eye, becoming wider and wider. This naturally boosted the morale of the entire fleet. "Brothers, we can't lose to our allies. Kill," the commander of the fleet said. "Kill." For a moment, The joint fleet slowly stabilized itself. After all, the combined strength of the Alliance fleet was more than the combined strength of the three pirate crews. It was just that he was caught off guard by the other party, and his mentality was a little unbalanced. Once the Allied forces adjusted, it was still unknown who would win and who would lose. At the same time, more and more coalition fleets chose to approach the ocean-going fleets. Zheng He took over the command of the Alliance fleet on the spot and took over the command of the fleet. Under Zheng He's command, the Alliance fleet became more and more ferocious, advancing and retreating with propriety. Through their actions and outstanding achievements, the ocean-going fleet was increasing the favorability of Somalia. Even if the ocean-going fleet suffered some damage, Ouyang Shuo felt that it was worth it. However, the battlefield was ever-changing, and unforeseen events always happened when one was unprepared. Just when the Allied forces were at their peak, the traitor who had been patiently waiting finally made his move. For the traitor, not exposing his identity was the best choice. However, the current situation did not allow the traitor to continue hiding. Otherwise, if the pirates failed and exposed him, they would also lose their reputation. Moreover, if he did not make his move, the traitor would also face the crazy revenge of the pirates. It was impossible to eradicate the pirates in the Gulf of Aden in one go. This thing was like a weed. Once it was cut, it would come back to life again after the winter. Therefore, for the traitor, there was no way out. He could only go down the path of darkness. In the current situation, he could only say that he had underestimated the combat power of the ocean-going fleet. The ocean-going fleet used bloody facts to tell the Allied forces and the pirates what a real navy was. On the battlefield, a strange sound of conchs sounded. Even the noisy battlefield, it could still be heard clearly. As if they had received a signal when the two sides were fighting, the members of the Cheetah mercenary group suddenly turned against the Shanghai City Navy. The traitor was the leader of the Allied forces, the commander of the Cheetah mercenary group, Farah. In order to prevent the traitor from seeing through them, the Shanghai City Navy soldiers did not know that the mutants around them were a group of traitors. Therefore, he was caught off guard and caught off guard. Under the attack of the traitor and the pirates, the Shanghai City Navy immediately suffered heavy losses. In particular, the traitor was exceptionally cunning. His targets were mainly fragile archers. As for the cannoneers, they were the main targets. This was indeed a ruthless move. Beside Ouyang Shuo, Farah waved his sword and slashed at Ouyang Shuo. It was as if Ouyang Shuo had eyes on his back, and he instantly swung his sky demon spear to block the sword. Taken aback, Farah retreated in an instant. You finally couldn't hold it in anymore. Ouyang Shuo turned around with a calm expression. Farah was shocked, and he couldn't help but blurt out, "You already knew? That night, you arranged for the men in black to assassinate me, right?" Ouyang Shuo said, "It seems like you really knew." Farah's eyes narrowed, and he had already calmed down. As expected of an ambitious and ruthless person, just based on his strong mental fortitude, not many people could have such a strong mental fortitude. "I'm very curious. How did you see through it?" Farah still didn't understand. "I thought everything was done flawlessly, and there shouldn't be such an obvious flaw." Ouyang Shuo smiled. "Flawlessly? You think too highly of yourself. Someone had already told me that there was a traitor in the Allied forces, but he couldn't confirm who it was. At first, I thought it was Daida, but it turned out that it wasn't." Naturally, no one told Ouyang Shuo about the traitor, and he just took the opportunity to scare Farah. "Why not Daida? Didn't all the clues point to him?" Farah asked. Ouyang Shuo shook his head. "Too perfect a clue is in itself the biggest flaw. That night, my whereabouts could only have been leaked by you. At first, I only had some suspicions, and it could also have been leaked by someone inside the Cheetah mercenary group, and not necessarily by you." And then, Farah asked, "You hurriedly executed Daida and tried to prove Daida's crime. You looked smart, but in reality, you exposed your guilty conscience. Think about it. As the leader of the Allied forces, you executed an important member of the Allied forces for an outsider you just met. If it was a normal person, they wouldn't do this. The only explanation is that you have an ulterior motive. Ouyang Shaw shook his head. So, I'm basically convinced that you, the leader of the Allied forces on the surface, are the rumored traitor. What really convinced me is that you arranged all the members of the mercenary group to the ocean-going fleet. The smell of conspiracy is too strong, and I can smell it from afar. Farah was speechless for a while, and his face darkened. He thought that his performance was perfect, but in the eyes of the opponent, he was like a clown. If it was anyone else, they wouldn't be able to accept it. Moreover, it was a conceited person like Farah. If that's the case, why didn't you expose me? Farah tried to struggle one last time. Ouyang Shual lightly said, "If I exposed you, would anyone believe it? The world was so wonderful, and people only wanted to believe the truth that they saw with their own eyes." It could be imagined that if Ouyang Shual tried to expose Farah, he would be attacked by Farah at any time. Before the war, the trust of the Somali players in the ocean-going fleet was almost zero. It had to be said that Zheng, he was a bit reckless in dealing with Tita. Recklessly executing Tita looked like revenge, but in fact, it completely separated Shanghai City and the Somali players. Of course, in that situation, Zheng he couldn't make a rational judgment. Even if Zheng he wanted to let Tita go, Chun Dameng and the other divine martial guards wouldn't let them go. So you pretended not to know and waited for me to expose myself so that the other players could see the true colors of the Cheetah mercenary group. Then you could reap the benefits, right? Farah said with an ugly expression. If you put it that way, I won't object. Ouyang Shual was calm. Farah was silent, and a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes again. You're too confident. You're not as confident as I thought. Farah didn't want to say any more. Your archers and cannoneers are almost paralyzed. Even if you can barely survive the boarding battle, let's see how you can fight the pirates from a distance. In fact, Farah's killing move was far more than that. Other than assassinating the archers and cannoneers, Farah also tried to assassinate Ouyang Shual and Zheng He, the two core members of the ocean fleet. Once they were killed, the alliance would be in chaos. Unfortunately, Ouyang Shual was already prepared. The 200 divine martial guards had disguised themselves as ordinary soldiers and were secretly guarding Zheng He. Thus, the assassination of Zheng He naturally ended in failure. As for Ouyang Shual, don't joke around. Farah alone couldn't do anything to Ouyang Shual. Ouyang Shual waved a sky demon spear and smiled. You should worry about your own fate. As he said that, he raised his spear and attacked. Ouyang Shual was the core of the alliance, and Farah was also the core of the Cheetah mercenary group. As long as Farah was taken down, things would be half done. As for the archers and cannoneers, since Ouyang Shual knew that they were spies, how could he not take precautions? As early as when the fleet set sail, half of the archers and cannoneers of the ocean fleet were ordered by Ouyang Shual to hide in the bottom of the cabins. This also meant that even if there was a surprise attack, the long-range firepower of the ocean fleet could still operate normally. Chapter 645. Even though Farah was the #1 fighter in Somalia, he paled in comparison to Ouyang Shual. The two of them fought with murderous intent, and they moved so fast that no one could catch the changes in their techniques. The two of them moved back and forth, and the onlookers could only hear the sounds of weapons clashing, but they didn't know who had the upper hand. Even if the onlookers wanted to help, they couldn't do so. A fight between masters had its own aura, and if one wasn't careful, they would be severely injured. Not a single person was able to get within 3 meters of him. Thus, the members of the Cheetah mercenary group could only give up and focus on attacking the Shanghai City Navy soldiers on the deck with the pirates. The deck was also filled with battle cries. With the divine martial guards on the Dragon Head, the pirates couldn't gain the upper hand. On the other warships, the Navy soldiers were suffering. Facing the heavy siege of the enemy, they could only bitterly hold on. The soldiers who were ordered to hide at the bottom of the cabins heard the battle above them, and they wanted to go out and kill the enemies, but they didn't dare to move without orders. They could only grit their teeth and endure the torment. On the Allied battleships, the Somali players were also in a killing frenzy. The betrayal of the Cheetah mercenary group made the players heartbroken, and they wanted to eat their flesh and drink their blood. The hatred they felt toward the cheetah mercenary group was equivalent to the guilt they felt toward the Shanghai City fleet. Such a righteous teacher. How noble was he? The Somali players only hoped to kill the enemies in front of them as soon as possible so that they could rush over to help the Shanghai City soldiers. Friendship on the battlefield was magical. Both sides fought side by side, and although they didn't communicate much, their fates were connected. The battle on the surface of the sea was reaching its climax. The blue surface of the sea was slowly dyed red by blood, and corpses floated on the surface. The wreckage of the sunken battleships was scattered everywhere. There were survivors who fell into the sea on top of some of the wreckage. The cruelty of a battle on the sea was evident. On the deck of the Dragonhead, in less than 40 moves, Farah was already in a dangerous situation. He wanted to escape from the battle, but he couldn't. Under the threat of the Sky Demon Spear, even a slight distraction could kill him on the spot. Farah felt a trace of regret in his heart. Some people on the forum claimed that not only was Shanghai City's feudal lord Wu Yi unparalleled in strategy and foresight, but his martial arts skills were also extraordinary. The #1 expert of the Star Nation, Chun Guang, was defeated within 40 moves. Farah didn't believe it and was even a little disdainful. The assassination of the black-clothed man had undoubtedly proved his judgment. The Marquis of Lianzhou is mediocre in martial arts. He was lucky enough to escape the pursuit. The leader of the black-clothed men reported. How could Farah know that Ouyang Shua would still display his prowess, even if he was in an unfamiliar dark night, in a messy alleyway, facing the sneak attacks of crossbows and the insidious hidden weapons that caught him off guard? More than 300 of the most elite assassins were completely buried in the nameless alley. If it had been a fair and above-board confrontation, these assassins probably wouldn't even have had the qualifications to make Ouyang Shua activate his demon god bloodline, let alone seriously injure him and almost lose his life on the spot. The leader of the black-robed men said this just to avoid punishment. He didn't tell Farah that when Ouyang Shua activated his demon god bloodline, he didn't even have the courage to fight. It wasn't that Farah didn't know that the black-clothed man's report wasn't accurate. The key was that he already had a preconceived notion. There were times when one's strength was limited, and a feudal lord who was immersed in the affairs of his territory all day long wouldn't have the time to cultivate martial arts. If Farah knew that Ouyang Shua took out 2 hours every morning and night to practice martial arts, be it in the hot summer or the cold winter, be it in the feudal lord's mansion or on the march, he wouldn't have made such an inference. How could an expert be trained in a day? Even if Ouyang Shua was talented and had abundant cultivation resources, he wouldn't be able to reach his current martial realm and achievements if he didn't persevere in cultivation for several years. Behind the dazzling brilliance of an expert, there were always countless days and nights of lonely cultivation hidden. Ouyang Shua immediately noticed Farah's absent-mindedness. How could he let go of such a good opportunity? After Ouyang Shua's spear art became unique, he was even more proficient in using the Sky Demon Spear. The Sky Demon Spear art and the Sky Demon Spear were like twins, no longer distinguishable from each other. The entire set of spear art didn't have a fixed style anymore. It could be used and retracted at will. The Sky Demon Spear lifted up and parried the opponent's long sword. Then, in a flash of lightning, with an incredible force and change of moves, the lift turned into a stab and directly pierced towards Farah's heart. As the #1 expert in Somalia, Farah's reaction was also fast. At the critical moment, he leaned to the right and narrowly avoided the attack by a few inches. The Sky Demon Spear's momentum didn't decrease, and it pierced into Farah's shoulder. Farah couldn't help but scream. The bones in his left arm were broken, and he was completely crippled. Ouyang Shua didn't show any mercy. Taking advantage of Farah's injury, he launched a series of powerful attacks, suppressing Farah to the point where he almost lost his life on the spot. This person was also tenacious and had a strong will to live. He was actually able to neutralize Ouyang Shua's killing moves again and again. Although he was inevitably injured every time he neutralized Ouyang Shua's attacks, he still miraculously survived. Seeing this, Ouyang Shua's eyes turned cold. He didn't want to be entangled anymore. The longer he delayed, the more disadvantageous it would be for Shanghai City. The Sky Demon Spear suddenly became bold and unrestrained. It went all out on the offense and completely gave up on defense. Such a fighting style inevitably revealed many flaws. Seeing this, Farah's eyes also narrowed, and he prepared a desperate counterattack. He identified a flaw, and his long sword stabbed out like lightning. The tip of the sword actually carried traces of white light. Obviously, this was also a killing move. At the same time Farah attacked, the Sky Demon Spear also stabbed at Farah. With such a fighting style, it was impossible for the two of them to avoid each other's attacks. It was as if they wanted to perish together. Now it depended on who had the courage to disregard life and death. In Farah's view, Lord Ouyang Shua definitely cherished his life, and he would definitely hesitate at the last moment. On the contrary, he had already launched a desperate counterattack. If he didn't succeed, he would die. Moreover, he still held the last trump card in his hand. In this way, victory was in his hands. How could Farah know that Ouyang Shua was wearing a divine armor? It had already been a month since he killed Chen Guang, and the double dragon shadow shield that came with the double dragon heaven-devouring armor could be used again. The so-called perishing together was simply a false proposition. Ding! The Sky Demon Spear and the long sword stabbed each other at almost the same time. The strange thing was that both of them were unharmed. Ouyang Shua was protected by the double dragon shadow shield, and Farah was also wearing a treasured armor. Although it could not emit a protective divine light, it was still invulnerable. Even the divine weapon, the Sky Demon Spear, was blocked. The only difference was that the double dragon heaven-devouring armor was an energy protection, and Farah's long sword did not make any substantial contact with Ouyang Shua's body. On the contrary, Farah's treasured armor relied on absolute hardness and toughness. Under the impact of the huge power of the Sky Demon Spear, coupled with the fact that his attack had missed, Farah staggered. No matter how slow Ouyang Shua was, he would not let go of such a good opportunity. He did not withdraw the Sky Demon Spear at all. With a sliding step, he rushed forward in the blink of an eye, and the Sky Demon Spear was already on Farah's neck. "Move and die," Ouyang Shua said coldly. Feeling the cold light coming from the tip of the spear on his neck, Farah dejectedly put down the long sword in his hand. "Why don't you just kill me?" He was indeed a formidable person. Even in such a desperate situation, he could still see a trace of hope. "Tell your people to stop, and I can spare your life." Ouyang Shua knew that for a top-notch adventurer like Farah, once he reincarnated, the loss would be immeasurable. Unless there was a great opportunity, it was almost impossible for him to make a comeback. Therefore, these players cherished their lives very much. Cherishing their lives was a flaw in itself. As expected, Farah's eyes flashed when he heard this, and he asked hopefully, "Are you serious?" "I never lie." For Ouyang Shua, he was concerned about the outcome of the entire war. It was not a big problem to kill Farah or not. In the face of war, personal grudges were not worth mentioning. Farah was also a formidable person, and he was able to rise and fall. "Marquis of Lian Province, you win." Farah completely admitted defeat, and he took out the conch again. The strange sound of the conch echoed again, and the noisy battlefield suddenly stopped. The members of the cheetah mercenary group who were still fighting heard the sound, and they quietly left the battlefield and gathered together. Zheng, he also received the news, and he commanded the soldiers of Shanghai City to focus on dealing with the pirates. The cheetah mercenary group stayed out of the battle, and the soldiers of the ocean-going fleet finally got a chance to breathe. The scales of victory once again tilted toward the Allied forces. Seeing this, the Somali players couldn't help but cheer. After the cheers, more intense fighting broke out. "Marquis of Lian Province, you fulfilled your promise," Farah reminded Ouyang Shua. Ouyang Shua shook his head. "There's no need to struggle or test the waters. When the pirates retreat, you'll find a way to survive." Facing such an opponent, Farah felt powerless. Zheng He, who was commanding the army, observed the situation on the battlefield and decisively ordered, "Attack." As soon as the military order was issued, war drums with a special rhythm sounded. Boom, 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 boom. For a moment, tens of thousands of archers hiding in the bottom of the cabins charged out with endless anger and fighting spirit, and they launched a surprise attack on the pirates. They hid behind the cabins and used it as cover to accurately snipe the pirates on the deck. Every time, a pirate's life would be taken away. It was efficient and merciless. As a result, the pirates were thrown into chaos. They wanted to rush to the cabins, but they were stopped by the saber and shield soldiers. The scales of the war had completely tilted. Pirates were never iron-blooded warriors who would fight to the death. When the battle was going well, they could be as fierce as wolves, and when the battle was going badly, they could retreat decisively like jackals. Know when to advance and when to retreat was their motto. Retreat. Tens of thousands of pirates surged forward like a black tide, and then retreated like the tide. Want to leave? It's not that easy, Ouyang Shual muttered to himself. Chapter 646. The pirates retreated like a black tide, and it was a spectacular scene. Ouyang Shual put away the sky demon spear that was on Farah's neck and said lightly, "Get out." Farah was obviously stunned, but he quickly reacted and retreated with the pirates, afraid that Ouyang Shual would go back on his words. Seeing that their leader was retreating, the members of the cheetah mercenary group who were still in a daze also left. Ouyang Shual promised to spare Farah's life. However, the other members of the cheetah mercenary group didn't receive such treatment. While they were retreating, they were mercilessly intercepted by the Navy. The Navy soldiers didn't forget that it was this group of traitors that caused them to suffer heavy losses. The shield soldiers were responsible for intercepting them, and the archers were responsible for killing them. Some even used cannons to kill the players who had already escaped from the battleships and boarded the small boats. It showed how deep the Navy soldiers' hatred was. The pirates who were running for their lives wouldn't help their allies at this time. They were more than happy that someone was attracting the firepower for them. So why would they ask for trouble? In the end, there were less than 2,000 members of the cheetah mercenary group who retreated with the pirates. Ouyang Shual didn't say anything as he looked at Farah's retreating back. Of course, he could break his promise and kill Farah. Or he could do it beautifully and let the Somali players deal with Farah. I promise not to kill you, but it doesn't mean that the players won't kill you. Unfortunately, no matter how he tried to cover it up, he would break his promise. A man who didn't keep his word couldn't stand tall. Even when facing enemies, he couldn't easily break his promise. For a feudal lord or even a future king, if he broke his promise today, he might break his promise tomorrow. There were 10,000 ways to deal with Farah, so why should he be in a hurry? If he did it for a small benefit, he would lose his righteousness and benefits. Letting Farah go was like letting a tiger go back to the mountains. However, Farah's life wasn't given by Ouyang Shual. It was exchanged with the condition that all the members of the cheetah mercenary group stop fighting. Since it was an exchange, Ouyang Shual had to keep his promise. As for how Farah would act in the future, it would be a headache for Somalia. Having a common enemy was not necessarily a bad thing for the cooperation between Shanghai City and Somalia. Chase. Zheng He commanded the fleet and began to attack the pirate ships. Fire. The cannoneer took his position again, his eyes filled with vengeful rage. Rumble. The sound of cannons exploded on the surface of the sea, setting off huge waves one after another. The pirates who were still on the small boats were immediately hit by the explosion, their boats destroyed and their people killed. In a naval artillery battle, the ocean-going fleet was the absolute king. It was an existence that made the enemy tremble in fear. After suffering heavy casualties, the pirate ships did not wait for everyone aboard. They immediately set sail and fled in all directions. The entire sea was filled with black pirate ships fleeing in all directions. It was truly a spectacle. The abandoned pirates could only shout helplessly, their eyes filled with despair. Assisting the Somali players to encircle the pirates was not considered a war. Hence, even though Ouyang Shual was able to obtain some merit points from killing the pirates, it was nothing compared to the Kingdom War. Since it was like this, How could Ouyang Shuo purely pursue killing his enemies? He ordered Zheng He to capture as many pirates as possible so that they could be reorganized into the navy and replenish their losses in this battle. Zheng He received the order and understood the Marquis's intention. He began to direct the cannons to chase after the large pirate ships. After sinking them, the cannons would continue to attack the next pirate ship. At the same time, the fleet sent out many Scarlet horseboats to capture the pirates that were abandoned in the sea. As long as they could keep their lives, how could the pirates refuse to surrender? In fact, when the Scarlet horseboats passed by, some pirates would approach them and cry, wanting to surrender. The scene was hilarious. As the chase continued, the number of pirates captured increased exponentially. There were also some members of the Cheetah mercenary group among them, and they were all captured on the warships. The naval pursuit only came to an end at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The wreckage of the warships floated in the waters near Sirius Island. It was a spectacular sight. The pirate ships that were not sunk had already escaped and disappeared in the vast sea. It would be extremely difficult to find them again. After this battle, the three pirate groups lost more than 20,000 people, and more than 20,000 people were captured. Only about 10,000 pirates and 1,000 members of the Cheetah mercenary group were lucky enough to escape. The Gulf of Aden would probably be peaceful for a while. Of course, just as Ouyang Shuo predicted, the pirates were difficult to eradicate, and it wouldn't be long before the pirates rose again. As for whether the three pirate groups would still be the rulers, it was still unknown. It was already 4 o'clock in the afternoon by the time the wounded were treated, the losses were counted, and the prisoners were taken care of. Ouyang Shuo handed all the captured members of the Cheetah mercenary group to the Somali players. Ouyang Shuo didn't care if they were killed or released. It was all up to the Somali players. It was obvious what kind of miserable fate awaited them. It was reported that the Cheetah mercenary group colluded with the pirates and betrayed the country through the Forum. The headquarters of the Cheetah mercenary group in the royal city was surrounded by the other guilds. It was foreseeable that this former #1 guild in Somalia would become history, and it would no longer be able to stay in the royal city or even in Somalia. Even if the innocent members of the mercenary group left, no guilds would accept them. What awaited them was to become a wandering ghost and suffer endless pursuit and disdain. Ouyang Shuo didn't have time to care about the fate of the Cheetah mercenary group. He was concerned about the losses of the ocean fleet. In this battle, more than 7,500 of the 20,000 Navy officers and soldiers of the ocean-going fleet had died. The archers suffered the heaviest losses, and more than 6,700 archers died in the ocean. Their deaths had a lot to do with Ouyang Shuo's decision. To put it bluntly, it was Ouyang Shuo, the Marquis, who personally sent these brave warriors to their deaths. Even though Ouyang Shuo had a heart of stone, he couldn't bear to see the rows of corpses on the deck. However, the wilderness was cruel, and if he had to do it again, Ouyang Shuo would still make the same choice. In exchange for the trust and gratitude of the Somali players at the smallest cost, it was an unchangeable strategic choice to attack another key node for the Grand Line plan by Shanghai City. Some blood had to be shed. What Ouyang Shuo could do was to increase the compensation and treat the families of the fallen soldiers well. Pass down the order. For each soldier who died in this battle, add an additional 10 gold coins to the compensation set by the military office. Ouyang Shuo said to Zheng He. Yes. Zheng He's tone inevitably had a trace of trembling. Zheng He naturally knew the ins and outs of the whole matter, but he didn't dare to delve into the deeper meaning behind it. The heart of Monarch was hard to fathom. Select 10,000 good fighters from the 20,000 pirate captives and integrate them into the Navy fleet. Then select a group of skilled sailors, and the rest of the captives will be handed over to the Allied forces to execute. Ouyang Shuo said lightly. His words were filled with bloodlust and bloodlust. If they didn't execute some of the pirate captives, they wouldn't be able to gain the trust of the Somali players. Understood. Zheng He responded. After a while, cheers came from the Allied forces' warships. Obviously, Ouyang Shuo's order to execute the pirate captives made the Somali players very satisfied, and they felt a great sense of revenge. The pirate captives' eyes revealed a trace of despair. The fate of the winner and the loser was so distinct that it drew a line between life and death. Ouyang Shual looked up at the distant Heavenly Wolf Island. His eyes were full of melancholy. It's time to harvest. Order the entire army to attack Heavenly Wolf Island and loot the wealth on the island. Yes. After a while, the Allied forces quickly advanced into Heavenly Wolf Island with the attitude of a victor. Heavenly Wolf Island was the nest of the Heavenly Wolf pirate group. Other than the adult pirates, there were also thousands of old, weak women and children living on the island. The entire island was a complete small town with all kinds of facilities. When the Heavenly Wolf pirate group was defeated, the island was instantly in chaos. The families on the island were anxious, and they felt that a disaster was imminent. On the top of the mountain, the pirate flag that symbolized the pirate group was taken down and replaced with a white flag. In the vast sea, there was no retreat, and surrender was their only way out. At 4:30 in the afternoon, the Allied forces slowly sailed into the port, ready to disembark. Sir, the representatives of the Allied forces ask for your permission to move freely on the island. Zheng He walked over with an ugly expression and bowed to Ouyang Shuo. After defeating the three pirate groups in one fell swoop, the ocean-going fleet made a name for itself in Somalia. Ouyang Shuo's prestige among the Somali players skyrocketed, and he was spontaneously supported by the players as the new leader of the generation. Therefore, before they took action, they consciously asked for Ouyang Shuo's permission. The players' so-called freedom of movement actually meant that they were allowed to burn, kill, and loot on the island. The Somali players hated the pirates to the bone. In this battle, other than the traitor, Cheetah mercenary group, more than half of the Allied Navy and adventure players were killed. A blood feud can only be washed away with blood, and a blood debt must be paid with blood, the players said. To Zheng He, this was just a war. Since it was a war, it should not affect the civilians, let alone a group of old, weak women and children. The ideals of the two were inevitably at odds. Because of this, Zheng He had already quarreled with the big bosses among the players, but he was unable to convince them. No matter what, the players insisted on carrying out a bloody revenge on the island. General Zheng, we can give all the treasures on the island to you without taking a single cent. Our only request is to wash the Heavenly Wolf Island with blood and avenge our dead compatriots, the player representative said. That's two different things. Zheng, he tried to refute. As for the distribution of the treasures, Shanghai City will not monopolize it, and the Marquis will definitely handle it impartially. It's the same thing. Neither of the two could convince the other, and in the end, it was up to Ouyang Shuo to make the decision. Chapter 647. Ouyang Shuo was silent for a long time before he said, "Tell them that I will distribute the treasures on the island. They will also be allowed to burn down the houses, ports, and other facilities on the island. As for the old, weak, women, and children, they could be reduced to servants or even slaves. However, slaughter is not allowed. This is the bottom line of Shanghai City." Ouyang Shuo would never lose his bottom line just to win the gratitude of the other party. If that was the case, even if he won for now, he would inevitably be despised in the future. On the contrary, his gentle and forceful attitude would only make the other party more respectful. Understood. Zheng He felt relieved and nodded solemnly. He then went to make arrangements. 10 minutes later, Zheng He finished negotiating with the players' representatives. The Somali players did not dare to defy Ouyang Shuo's ban. Both sides took a step back and reached an agreement. Tens of thousands of players and the Divine Martial Guards arrived on Heavenly Wolf Island as victors. Ouyang Shuo was not in a hurry to disembark. Instead, he stood on the deck and silently looked at the island in front of him. Less than half an hour after the players arrived on the island, smoke rose from the island. The victors were cheering, and the losers were crying. One house after another was engulfed in flames, and the entire island was engulfed in a sea of fire. The old, weak, women, and children on the island were rudely driven to the open space in the port. All of them were trembling in fear, and their eyes were lifeless. In this chaotic world, the people were like rootless duckweed, trampled by others. Seeing their homes burned down, the people's eyes revealed unconcealable pain and sorrow. Some of the children in the crowd even looked at the Somali players with a trace of hatred in their eyes. In the eyes of the children, they were the real bandits. The players looted the houses one by one, and anything of value was collected. After the looting, they set the houses on fire and burned them to ashes. Boxes after boxes of gold and silver were carried to the port and piled up high. It was inevitable that the players who participated in the looting would hide some of their belongings and secretly put them in their storage bags. As long as they did not go overboard, Zheng He, who was in charge of supervising them, would turn a blind eye. Participating in the looting was a benefit for the players. There was not much in the ordinary houses, and the truly valuable ones were the pirate group's headquarters. The treasury, the secret chamber, the armory, and all the other important places were swept clean by the army one by one. These places were all searched by the Divine Martial Guard. Players were not allowed to interfere. Otherwise, who knew what these players would do once they were tempted by the treasures? After looting the headquarters, they naturally gave them a big fire. The raging fire incessantly stimulated the players' desire to kill, causing it to burst out completely. Some of the players became hot-tempered and even disregarded Ouyang Shua's ban and waved their butcher knives at the residents of the island. In an instant, 2 old men fell to the ground, and their blood flowed everywhere. Under the illumination of the fire, their faces looked particularly ferocious. The accompanying Divine Martial Guard saw this and firmly stopped them. The 2 sides almost clashed on the island. Fortunately, Zheng He appeared in time and prevented the bloodshed. When Ouyang Shuo received the news, his expression became gloomy. He ordered for the player to be soaked in the sea to sober him up. As the saying goes, it is easy to destroy, but hard to build. In less than 2 hours, the entire island was completely turned into ruins. Even in the humid environment of the island, the fire did not extinguish. Towards the end, the fire continued to spread, burning the plants, crops, and everything else on the island. The entire pirate island became bare, and it was an eyesore. The pirate captives that Shanghai City handed over to the Somali players to be executed were also executed by the players on the island. Their heads were chopped off and strung on bamboo poles, forming a circle around the island. It was a shocking scene. Seeing this, Ouyang Shuo was silent. Faced with such a dead island, Ouyang Shuo no longer had the intention to go to the island. He ordered the entire army to spend the night on the ship and return the next morning. The Somali players, on the other hand, were full of enthusiasm. When night fell, they even set up bonfires on the island and held a lively bonfire party to celebrate this hard-won victory. They did not care at all about the pirate heads that were strung on the side. The players even invited Ouyang Shuo to celebrate together, but Ouyang Shuo tactfully declined. Thinking about the families of the pirates who were brutally escorted onto the warship, Ouyang Shuo could not integrate into such a lively atmosphere. It was too strange. For the whole night, Zheng He was in charge of counting the looted treasures. As the nest of the largest pirate group in the Gulf of Aden, Heavenly Wolf Island had accumulated a considerable amount of treasures over the years. In the end, they had looted a total of 520,000 gold coins, 6 boxes of jewelry, and more than 4,000 pieces of various weapons and equipment. As for the ordinary resources, they had already been completely burned by the fire. In addition, there were 3 treasures found in the secret room, which were sent to Ouyang Shuo by Zheng He alone. Ouyang Shuo took a look and saw that it was a scroll, a pair of boots, and a telescope. Name: Group Resurrection Scroll. Type: Special Item. Restriction: One-time use item, only available to players and lords. Attribute: Can spend a certain amount of gold coins to resurrect the dead. There is no upper limit. Below 10,000 will cost 10 gold coins per person. For every 10,000 increase in the upper limit, the cost will increase by 10 gold coins per person. Note: Generals of high rank and above, including historical generals, cannot be resurrected. There is no doubt that this was a very expensive scroll. Ordinary people could not afford to use it. According to the settings of the scroll, it would cost as much as 1,000,000 gold coins to resurrect 40,000 soldiers, and the more it went, the less worth it would be. When it came to 50,000 soldiers, it would cost as much as 500,000 gold coins to resurrect 10,000 soldiers. Even with Shanghai City's wealth, it could not support such a consumption. According to Ouyang Shua's estimation, resurrecting 50,000 soldiers was basically the upper limit that a lord could bear. More importantly, the scroll was a one-time use item. It would not be used unless it was a critical battle or a life-and-death situation. With this scroll, it was equivalent to having another trump card. Ouyang Shua put down the group resurrection scroll, picked up the pair of boots, and looked at its attributes. The boots were very exquisitely made. There were dragon patterns carved on the surface, and there was even a faint metallic luster, which made them look very colorful. Name: Cloud Dragon 9 Stripes Boots, God Tier. Type: Heavy Armor. Weight: 10 kg. Defense: 90. Toughness: 90. Characteristics: Light Body, reduces the weight of the body by 50. Ultimate Skill: Swimming Dragon Body, infuses true essence into the boots, increases movement speed by 150, increases agility by 100, lasts for half an hour. Cooldown time of 1 month. Restricted professions: General, Swordsman, Bailiff, etc. Remarks: Sewn from the skin of a real dragon, nourished by dragon blood, and forged by heavenly fire. Only a tyrant can wield it. Bind it by blood, cannot be traded, cannot be dropped, and can be evolved again. Remarks: The Cloud Dragon 9 Stripes boots are a part of the God Tier set, Dragon's Battle. When a complete set is assembled, the set's attributes can be activated. What a pleasant surprise, Ouyang Shua said with a smile. He had not expected to find the second part of the Dragon's Battle set so quickly. It could only be said that Ouyang Shua's source of fortune was really starting to make a comeback. Finally, there was the telescope. The telescope was very simple and looked to be made of bronze. Name: Nautical Telescope, Dark Gold. Type: Support Item. Restrictions: Only usable by seafarers. Attributes: Increases nautical vision by 50, increases sea visibility by 40. Remarks: This is a special telescope. If used properly, it will have endless uses. Interesting thing, Ouyang Shua said, and directly handed the telescope to Zheng He. Take it. Thank you, Marquis, for your reward. Zheng He was also very fond of the telescope, so he did not reject it and immediately accepted it. According to the Somali players, the defeat of the pirates was due to the great contribution of the ocean fleet, and they had made a great sacrifice. Hence, in order to repay Shanghai City, they did not participate in the distribution of the treasures. Ouyang Shua naturally would not go to the extreme. He only planned on taking the 2 treasures, the Group Resurrection Scroll and the Cloud Dragon 9 Stripes combat boots. The rest of the treasures would be given to the players. Hundreds of thousands of gold coins were nothing to Ouyang Shua. After all, Ouyang Shua had a total of 4 million gold coins in his storage bag. Other than the 2 million gold coins from the North Sea Base treasure trove, Ouyang Shua also had the 2 million gold coins from the sale of the island in Star State County with him. With the Bank of the Four Seas supporting it, the territory's finances temporarily did not need the funds. Ouyang Shua brought the funds with him to prepare for Gaia's auction in the 4th year. He did not want it to be like the previous auction, where he had no luck with the treasures due to his lack of funds. If history did not deviate, Gaia's auction in the 4th year would be very different from the previous 3 auctions. This was because from the beginning of Gaia's 4th year, the various countries would no longer hold their own system auctions. Instead, they would combine them and hold a global auction, allowing players from all over the world to compete on the same stage. Without sufficient funds, it would be impossible. Gaia's arrangement was also to further prevent the spread of treasures. As such, the strong would become stronger, and the weak would become weaker. Gaia's law of survival in the jungle, where the strong preyed on the weak, was applied to the competition between players to perfection. Secondly, if everything went smoothly on this trip to England, they would have to spend a large sum of money. The moment the distribution of the treasures was announced, the Somali players were extremely excited. To them, although the group resurrection scroll and the Cloud Dragon 9-striped combat boots were precious, they were not practical, and they could not afford to use them. Furthermore, there were too many of them, so it was difficult to distribute them. It was not as practical as the 520,000 gold coins, 6 chests of jewelry, and more than 4,000 pieces of equipment. The 10,000 or so Somali players who were lucky enough to survive each received a sizable amount of money. The Overlord players split the captured pirate ships. As such, everyone was naturally happy. Chapter 648. In a nameless sea in the Gulf of Aden. While the Allied forces were looting the Sirius Island, the Sirius pirates, who had fled from the battlefield, experienced a drastic change. Before the war, the Sirius pirates had more than 25,000 people, and they had more than 150 ships of various sizes. After the battle, not only did the pirates lose their base, but their fleet was also almost destroyed. What was even more tragic was that their captain, Ephia, was also killed during the battle. The entire pirate group was now leaderless. At around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the remnants of the pirate group finally gathered together. There were less than 6,000 survivors, and there were only about 20 warships left. Farah and more than 600 members of the Cheetah mercenary group accompanied them. After learning that their captain, Ephia, had died, internal strife immediately broke out within the pirate group. In order to fight for the position of captain, the 5 leaders did not give in to each other, and they did not even hesitate to fight each other. It was about to evolve into a bloody conflict. For the pirates, who were already on the verge of collapse, it was one disaster after another. As the saying goes, a skinny camel is still bigger than a horse. Even though the Sirius pirates had suffered heavy losses, they were still a force that could not be ignored in the Gulf of Aden. After all, the other 2 pirate groups had also suffered heavy losses in this battle. The balance of power between the 3 pirate groups in the Gulf of Aden was not broken. Because of this, the position of captain was very tempting to the leaders. At this moment, a legendary figure in the Gulf of Aden, Farah, stepped forward at the right time and began the most glorious journey of his life as the king of One Piece. Regarding Farah, there was no lack of complaints within the pirate group. It was the inaction of the Cheetah mercenary group at the critical moment that led to the reversal of the entire battle. Previously, the 5 leaders had no time to care about Farah and his team because they were fighting for the position of captain. Now that Farah had stepped forward, wasn't he seeking his own death? In fact, that was not the case. Farah was an ambitious person who especially liked to use tricks and schemes. How could he not have a trump card to cooperate with the 3 major pirate groups, especially the Sirius pirates? Otherwise, the Sirius pirates would have thrown them into the sea to feed the fishes during their escape. Not to mention Ouyang Shaw, even the Somali players did not understand why Farah betrayed them. As the leader of the largest guild in Somalia and the #1 player in the country, Farah should have already achieved success and recognition. Why did he still take the risk and collude with pirates to harm the players of the country? The root of this was that the pirate group could bring him huge benefits. Back in the 2nd year of Gaia, by chance, Farah had colluded with the Skywolf pirate group. One of them was in the open, while the other was in the dark. Farah made use of the Cheetah mercenary group's huge influence in the country to gather information on the sailing routes of the country's merchant ships. He then passed the information to the Sirius pirate group so that they could plunder the merchant ships. The loot would be split 30-70, so it was naturally a win-win situation. In just 1 year, Farah had made a huge profit of 150,000 gold coins. At the same time, Farah was also an ambitious person. He was extremely greedy and had a huge appetite. A year had passed, and just working with the pirates and earning 30% of the profits was no longer enough to satisfy Farah's appetite. His real goal was to completely control the pirate group and make it a secret branch of the Cheetah mercenary group. Then, he would take all the looted wealth for himself. Farah began to use the looted wealth to consciously cultivate trusted aides within the pirate group. At the beginning of the 3rd year of Gaia, Farah was appointed as the second leader by Captain Effia. This unexpected appointment was the result of Farah's trusted aides secretly pushing for it. From this, it could be seen that Farah's foundation in the pirate group was deep enough to threaten Effia's rule. Effia sensed this and was about to take action when Farah alertly sent him a tempting cake. Join forces with the three pirate groups, set up an ambush, and defeat the Somali Navy in one fell swoop. The Somali Navy had always been the biggest obstacle for the pirates to plunder merchant ships. To be able to get rid of this thorn in their side in one fell swoop, the three pirate groups could not resist such a temptation. Naturally, both sides hit it off, which led to the story that had happened before. The only variable was probably the untimely appearance of the ocean-going fleet in Somalia. Otherwise, the tragedy of the Somali Navy in his previous life would definitely happen again. It was precisely because of this that Farah repeatedly set up traps in Port Berbera. It was to eliminate this variable and get things back on track. At the same time, the appearance of the ocean-going fleet made Farah have other ideas. It had to be said that most ambitious people could not control their desires. After discovering that he was being suspected by Captain Effia, Farah had been thinking about how to get rid of Effia and then support a puppet captain within the pirate group to completely control the pirate group. The appearance of the ocean-going fleet was an opportunity. Farah's plan was to use the ocean-going fleet to deal a heavy blow to the pirate group. He could take this opportunity to take control of the pirate group, killing two birds with one stone. Unfortunately, Farah had not heard of the ancient adage, "War is like fire, not fire." Farah had overestimated his ability to play with fire, and he had also underestimated the power of the fire that was the ocean-going fleet. In the end, not only did he not make use of the fire, he was burned by the fire. The lesson was profound. Fortunately, the heavens did not destroy Farah, giving him a chance in a desperate situation. Captain Effia's death and the Skywolf pirate group falling into internal strife gave Farah a chance to rise again. He keenly sensed that the opportunity to completely control the pirate group had quietly arrived. Although the leaders were quite critical of Farah, Farah was still the second in command of the group. He was the second in name only. After the death of the captain, Farah's position became more and more important. If I can win the support of the second in command, the captain's throne will be secured, the leaders thought. In the eyes of the pirate leaders, Farah was a mutant, and he would eventually go ashore. He could not compete with them for the captain's throne. That was why they had such naive thoughts. They did not know that Farah could not go back at all. The foundation of the Cheetah mercenary group in Somalia had been uprooted by the major guilds, and even their headquarters had been occupied. If Farah dared to go ashore, he would probably be beaten to death by the Somali players. Traitor Farah had been permanently nailed to the pillar of shame in Somali history. This was the saying, one careless move, and the whole game would be lost. After Farah stepped forward to mediate, the five leaders stopped fighting, and the internal conflict was finally resolved. In the evening, Farah warmly invited the five leaders to the ship to discuss the future of the pirate group. With different thoughts in mind, the five leaders arrived on time at 7 o'clock at night. As a mysterious second-in-command of the pirate group, Farah owned a pirate ship alone. Other than the sailors, there were 600 members of the Cheetah mercenary group on the ship. Through the forum, they already knew about the miserable situation of their comrades who were still in the country, and they were all depressed. Inevitably, they even had some complaints about their captain, Farah. It was Farah's decision that completely dragged them into the abyss. However, Farah was their only support now. Only by following their leader would they be able to find a way to survive. If they went back, they would only die. From this, it could be seen that Farah's strategy was brilliant. To the weak, they are naturally obedient and lazy. As long as they are not forced into a dead end, give them a glimmer of hope, and they will be at the mercy of the strong. This was Farah's life motto. On the battlefield, under such circumstances, the members of the Cheetah mercenary group could still listen to the captain's command and resolutely betray him. This was enough to show how high Farah's prestige in the mercenary group was. Not to mention other things. At least in the area of buying people's hearts, Farah was worthy of praise. Just before dinner, the regiment commander once again pointed out the right path for them and gave them hope. After listening to the captain's plan, the captain's eyes were burning and their fighting spirit was reignited. Let's do it. Inside the cabin, Farah and the 5 leaders were drinking, and it was very lively. While they were drunk, the shadow of the defeat in the day seemed to have disappeared along with the drunkenness in their hearts. It was, today we have wine, today we get drunk, tomorrow we worry, tomorrow we worry. However, the leaders didn't know that this was a banquet at Hongmen. Of course, Farah didn't know about the banquet at Hongmen, but as a natural conspirator, it didn't stop him from figuring out a similar method. After 3 rounds of drinking, Farah suddenly smashed the glass, and the sound was extremely ear-piercing. The 5 leaders were already a little drunk, and they didn't know why, but they suddenly saw more than 20 assassins with sharp blades in their hands suddenly rush into the cabin. Without saying anything, they attacked them. Cold light flashed, and a murderous aura was awe-inspiring. This time, the drunkenness of the leaders completely dissipated, and they were scared into a cold sweat. They were about to pick up their weapons to fight back, but it was too late. In less than 5 minutes, in this split second, the 5 leaders of the pirate group were all killed by the players with swords and died on the spot. In this way, the pirate group was really a group of dragons without a leader. The leaders were killed, and the pirates were in an uproar, shouting to avenge their respective leaders. It seemed that it was about to become a melee. At this time, the cronies that Farah had cultivated in the pirate group finally showed their power. They immediately took action, subdued the most fierce companions, and shouted that the second leader would succeed the position of the captain. In this time of crisis, only the second leader can lead us out of the predicament, the cronies said. Seeing this, the pirates were disappointed. They looked around, and there was no hope of a comeback, so they could only succumb to reality. In a fundamental sense, pirates were not a group of trustworthy people. In this way, Farah successfully ascended to the throne of the captain and began his career as the Pirate King. Chapter 649. The next morning, the Alliance fleet set off. In the port of Berbera, the soldiers who returned with glory were warmly welcomed by the players. "Welcome, our heroes!" As the soldiers walked on the streets, wild cheers could be heard from both sides. From time to time, childish children would rush up to give them flowers, beautiful girls would give them warm hugs, and rough men would give them thumbs up. The entire port of Berbera was immersed in a festive atmosphere. When the country was betrayed, the brave stepped forward. They are the true heroes. In the face of betrayal, creating heroes could quickly heal the trauma in the hearts of the people. In the evening, the port of Berbera was as lively as it was during the day, with fireworks and bonfires. In order to welcome the return of the heroes, all the taverns and restaurants in the port announced that all the soldiers who returned with glory could eat and drink for free. This pushed the festive atmosphere to a peak. Of course, only the Somali players were truly cheered and worshipped by the people. The ocean-going fleet led by Ouyang Shua did not even disembark, leaving all the glory to the Somalis. June 17th, the headquarters of the Alliance fleet. The players who had been drunk for the whole night woke up one by one and began to deal with business. Since the elimination of the pirates had come to an end, they would also disperse, either returning to the royal city or returning to their territories. Before that, they still had one more thing to do, and that was to ask for credit for the ocean-going fleet. Marquis Lien Zhou, you're the true heroes of this battle. When we return to the royal city, we will definitely ask for credit for you. Thank you. Ouyang Shua cupped his fists and expressed his gratitude. This was a reward that Shanghai City deserved, so Ouyang Shua did not need to be polite. Besides, the foreign players were not used to China's politeness. They prefer to deal with people directly. Marquis Lien Zhou, you are our friend. Before leaving, the players hugged Ouyang Shua one by one. Ouyang Shua smiled and accepted all of them. If everything went smoothly, Shanghai City would have to deal with the Somali players in the future, so it was naturally best to gain their friendship. After all, a powerful dragon could not suppress a local snake. After everyone dispersed, Ouyang Shua stayed at the port to wait for the good news. In ancient times, in addition to actual military merits, the necessary operation and currying favor were also essential. Ouyang Shua naturally did not think that he could get the reward he wanted by just waiting. Long before the Allied fleet set sail, the accompanying official from the Office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies had already rushed to King's City with chests of gold, silver, and jewels. His goal was to befriend the nobles of Royal City and pave the way for Shanghai City. In this aspect, the Chamberlain of Dependencies was the true expert. A few days' time, coupled with a large amount of money, was enough for the important figures of the kingdom to get to know a Lord Marquis called Not Wearing Clothes. As the saying goes, take someone's money and help them get rid of their troubles. When the king organized a discussion on how to reward Ouyang Shua, the officials who received the benefits naturally didn't mind putting in a few good words for him if it didn't cost them much effort. Among them, those who took the big cut would even euphemistically mention Shanghai City's needs. In this way, Ouyang Shua would be able to attain his objective. On the 18th day of the 6th month, King City's reward was announced. The one who announced the decree was the chief clerk of the kingdom, an old man with white hair. The Lord of Shanghai City, the supreme commander of the ocean-going fleet, the eternal friend of Somalia, the inhuman Marquis of Lianzhou, has helped the kingdom's navy, defeated the 3 evil pirate groups in the Gulf of Aden, thwarted the plot of the traitor Farah, and saved the kingdom's navy from danger. His meritorious service is outstanding. Helping out righteously is righteousness. Seeing through a conspiracy is wisdom. Defeating a strong enemy is courage. Showing mercy to the old and weak is benevolence. Whether it is benevolence, righteousness, courage, or wisdom, Marquis Lianzhou is outstanding. Such a virtuous person should be a role model for the kingdom. Therefore, I hereby confer the title of Honorary Knight of Not Wearing Clothes Kingdom, confer the title of First-Class Baron, and enjoy the same aristocratic treatment as the barons of the kingdom. 100 square kilometers of land, 1,000 miles north of Barbera Port, will be designated as the permanent fief of Barony Yong. When the reward was announced, even the Somali players were surprised. An honorary knight and an exclusive fief. It had to be said that this reward was too generous. Thank you for the reward, Your Majesty. Ouyang Shua's lips curled into a smile as he bowed. Congratulations, Baron Yong, the clerk said with a smile. Ouyang Shua was slightly embarrassed. Everything else was fine, but the title was a pain in the ass. The royal clerk must have racked his brains. Thinking that the Marquis of Lianzhou came from China, he must have found an old Analects of Confucius from somewhere and recited it according to the text. Only then did he come up with the description of benevolence and righteousness in the decree. The title of Baron Yong came from this. Thank you. Ouyang Shua faintly smiled and smoothly handed over a large agate stone. When the clerk saw this, he took it without a trace, and the smile on his face became even wider. Even his wrinkles appeared. After sending off the clerk, Ouyang Shua immediately made a recruitment announcement in Barbera Port. For 3 days from now, Shanghai City is recruiting carpenters, masons, painters, blacksmiths, and other craftsmen. Anyone related to the construction of the city will be on the recruitment list. There is no upper limit. Food and accommodation will be provided at the construction site. The minimum monthly salary is 2 gold coins. Middle to high-level craftsmen will be treated well. The details will be discussed in person. The announcement caused a huge uproar in the port. In Somalia, a mid-level craftsman could only earn 1 gold coin a month at most, and they had to take care of their own food and accommodation. In comparison, the treatment offered by Shanghai City was more than doubled. In just one morning, more than 500 people signed up. Other than craftsmen, Ouyang Shua was also recruiting ordinary laborers. Food and accommodation were also provided, and the minimum salary was 1 gold coin. There was no shortage of such laborers at the port. As soon as the recruitment announcement was made, many people responded. In just one day, Shanghai City had recruited 2,000 laborers. Other than that, it was a crazy purchase. Grain, vegetables, meat, cloth, and other resources were all on Shanghai City's shopping list. Everything related to food, clothing, housing, and transportation, including the materials needed to build the city, was on Shanghai City's shopping list. Due to the huge number of orders, Ouyang Shuo almost cleared out all the materials in Barbera port. Such a crazy act could no longer be described as simple heroism. When the merchants saw this, they promised to transport the materials to their fief for free via merchant ships. As such, everyone was naturally happy. The next day, Shanghai City's recruitment announcement and purchase news spread like a virus to the surrounding cities. In response, Ouyang Shuo's attitude was to accept everything, as if he was not short of money. Hundreds and thousands of craftsmen and carriages loaded with goods gathered like streams from the surrounding cities to Barbera port. Eventually, they would converge into a torrent. Marquis Lianzhou's image in the kingdom was very trusted by the people, and they were not worried that he would go back on his word. Many merchants did not even ask questions and directly pulled the goods from the published purchase list. Such a large movement even alarmed the royal city. After receiving the news, the royal city was naturally in an uproar again. There were even craftsmen, mainly advanced and master craftsmen, who didn't hesitate to spend 1 gold coin to directly teleport to Barbera port to apply for the job. Even the big shots among the Somali players couldn't help but pay a visit to seek a possible cooperation. Naturally, Ouyang Shuo welcomed this with open arms. Whether it was the profession players in the guild or the various materials produced by the territory, Shanghai City urgently needed them. Both sides hit it off and began their first close cooperation. Buy. No matter how large the goods were, Marquis Lianzhou did not hesitate at all and directly bought them. The entire country of Somalia was stunned by Marquis Lianzhou's invincible wealth. Those who didn't know better would think that Marquis Lianzhou was going to buy the entire country of Somalia. 3 days. In just 3 days, Ouyang Shuo spent more than 200,000 gold coins to purchase various materials for the construction of the city. At the same time, 10,000 craftsmen, 15,000 profession players, and 40,000 coolies were also recruited. With such a large team, their monthly salary was more than 100,000 gold coins. After the recruitment, they would be transported to the fief in batches by ship. At the same time, a large number of purchased materials would also be transported to the fief in batches by merchant ships. Every day, merchant ships traveled between Barbera port and the fief in an endless stream, day and night. The small fief immediately became the focus of the entire kingdom. The funny thing was that Ouyang Shuo, the owner of the fief, had not even set foot on the soil of the fief. On June 21st, the ocean-going fleet set off for the fief. Accompanying them were more than 3,000 old, weak, women, and children captured from Heavenly Wolf Island. The other players were not interested in accepting these pirate orphans. Apart from a few people with unique tastes, who chose a few beautiful young girls to be servants or slaves, the rest were handed over to Shanghai City to deal with. Ouyang Shuo thought about it, and simply brought all of them to the fief. In this way, they could be considered the first group of subjects of the fief. After a few days together, these orphans had already learned from others that it was Marquis Lianzhou's benevolence that allowed them to crawl out of the mouth of the Grim Reaper and live. Therefore, they were grateful to Marquis Lianzhou. Because of this, Ouyang Shuo was at ease to accept them. He did not want to raise a group of ungrateful people. Moreover, with the supervision of the Black Snake Guards and the Shanghai Guards, even if some of them were hostile, they would not be able to escape misfortune. In the port of Barbera, Ouyang Shuo left a few officials and a naval battalion in charge of supervising the transportation of craftsmen and materials, as well as the subsequent sporadic procurement and recruitment. Somalia had the longest coastline in the whole of Africa. After the game map was expanded 10 times, apart from the port of Barbera, there were some other harbors in northern Somalia that were suitable for the construction of ports. Ouyang Shuo's fief was one of them. It covered an area of 100 square kilometers, which was equivalent to the area of a level 3 village. It was completely compatible with the title of a baron. At the very least, the kingdom did not skimp on the size of the fief. The geographical location of the fief was also excellent. It was a plain valley surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, and to the north of the valley was a natural harbor. The terrain of the fief was exactly the same as the Lianzhou Basin, except that it was a few thousand times smaller. Yes, a few thousand times smaller, because the Lianzhou Basin covered an area of 240,000 square kilometers. Such a basin was too common in the game. Any small valley in the real world could be formed in such a narrow basin after the game map was expanded 10 times. According to normal territorial construction, such a fief could only build a level 3 village at most, and it was far away from the big cities, so there was no prospect of development. The kingdom bestowed this land to Ouyang Shua, which was more symbolic than practical. The problem was that Ouyang Shua's strategic vision and strategic layout were different from ordinary people. The ocean-going fleet had sacrificed a lot, and Ouyang Shua had tried his best to plan, so how could he allow a small village? It was Ouyang Shua's unswerving goal to establish an important node on the Grand Line in Somalia. Therefore, Ouyang Shua could only break the convention. In a general territory, the area of the city occupied was less than 1% of the entire territory, or even less. Most of the land was used to grow crops and develop the 5 major industries of agriculture, forestry, livestock, animal husbandry, and fishing. Such an arrangement was normal. First, the city could not be built infinitely large. Not to mention that it would cost a lot of money. The management of the city was a major problem. Even a colossus like Shanghai City was only a tiny grain of rice in the Lianzhou Basin. Second, the first 2 items of clothing, food, housing, and transportation needed the support of agriculture, forestry, animal husbandry, and fishing. Otherwise, the people in the territory could only starve to death. How could they talk about territorial construction? Ouyang Shua's way of doing things was different. He planned to build a huge city covering an area of 100 square kilometers in the entire fief. In other words, a city wall was erected along the periphery of the fief. Outside the city, no land was left for agriculture, forestry, animal husbandry, fishing, and other basic industries. Such a plan was indeed crazy, but after thinking about it carefully, it was reasonable. First, the fief did not occupy a large area, so the first problem did not exist at all. As for the food and clothing of the people in the territory, Ouyang Shua planned to solve it through external purchases. The entire fief would be a commercial capital. Commerce and ocean trade were the soul of the city. As long as there was money, other living supplies could be purchased from Somalia. Even after the ocean trade was launched, they could also purchase from neighboring countries. There was no need to worry about not being able to buy supplies. The premise was that there must be money. In other words, the commercial capital must be able to earn enough money and receive enough business taxes. Otherwise, relying on Ouyang Shua's unilateral subsidies could not be maintained for a long time. In this regard, Ouyang Shua was full of confidence. The rich profits of ocean trade were enough to make all merchants crazy. The first thing Ouyang Shua did when he arrived at the fief was to give a name to the city that was about to start construction. In the end, Ouyang Shua chose Friendship City. Friendship City symbolized the friendship between Shanghai City and Somalia, and also conveyed Shanghai City's intention of peace to African and European countries. The port outside the city was named Brave Port. Chapter 650. Somalia, Port of the Brave. The Brave Port that had yet to be developed was still a natural harbor with rippling blue waves. There were no port facilities built in the harbor. For the convenience of unloading goods, the merchant ships had temporarily built rows of wooden stakes and laid a layer of wooden planks, making it look extremely shabby. Even so, there was still an endless stream of ships entering and exiting the harbor. Seeing the fleet slowly approaching, the merchant ships docked at the harbor consciously made way for them. They were not afraid, but they respected the fleet from the bottom of their hearts. Under Zheng He's command, the fleet slowly docked at the west side of the harbor. Ouyang Shua planned to split the Port of the Brave into two. The west side would be a dedicated military port for the Navy stationed there to dock and resupply. The east side would be a purely trading port for the merchant ships to dock and resupply. The two sides were clearly separated and did not interfere with each other. In the middle, Ouyang Shua planned to build a large shipyard to produce merchant ships and warships. Wherever the Navy was stationed, the shipyard would be built there. This was Ouyang Shua's consistent request. Not to mention other things, just the profits earned from selling merchant ships were enough to maintain the daily operations of the Friendship City. As the new pillar industry of the territory, Shanghai City's shipbuilding industry had long matured. According to the Census Department's year-end inventory, there were no less than 30,000 to 40,000 people engaged in shipbuilding-related work in the territory. And at most a week, Shanghai City would be able to build a large shipyard. After Ouyang Shua went ashore, he saw all kinds of materials piled up like a mountain and nodded in satisfaction. The laborers who came and went were like ants, lining up to carry bags of goods from the cabin. When they saw Ouyang Shua and his group, they would consciously stop and bow before leaving. Ouyang Shua was the ruler of the territory. According to the plan, the first construction task of the territory was not to build the city walls or the harbor, but to build the mayor's residence and relay station. The mayor's residence was symbolic. Only when the mayor's residence was built would Ouyang Shua officially become the master of the valley and start his rule. As for the relay station, it was for communication. Only when the relay station was built could Ouyang Shua communicate with the country. It was impossible to build the Friendship City just by relying on the fleet and the local hire craftsmen. Not to mention other things, what Ouyang Shua needed the most now was an architectural design team. The overall plan of the Friendship City had to be scientific and reasonable, and it had to be designed by professionals. There were countless other complicated matters that involved the construction of the city. Even after the construction of the city was completed, there was still the problem of managing the city. The various officials would have to follow the structure of Shanghai City and quickly operate the city. Of course, a city guard was needed to oversee the overall situation. After all, there were only a few officials accompanying the ocean-going fleet. Their role was only to assist Ouyang Shua in handling some daily affairs. The real helmsman had to be recruited from the territory. All of these required the support of the territory. Everything else was fine, but the key was time. From a Star Continent port to the Brave port, it would take at least 25 days. Including the time needed to deploy and assemble the troops, it would probably take a month. During this period of time, Ouyang Shua was prepared to personally take the lead in building the port and the city walls. 5 military tents formed a circle in the center of the valley. This was the temporary command center for the construction of the fief. Ouyang Shua personally sat in the command center and deployed craftsmen and laborers to start the construction of the fief in full swing. The entire fief immediately turned into a large construction site, bustling with activity. Ouyang Shua felt as though he had returned to his year in Gaia, when he personally led everyone to build Shanghai City. Now that he thought about it, it was still vivid in his mind, as though it had happened yesterday. In fact, in a short 2 years, the territory had undergone earth-shattering changes. It had achieved a qualitative leap. As for Ouyang Shua, he was no longer the Ouyang Shua of the past. Even so, Ouyang Shua still felt an extraordinary passion for construction. In a blink of an eye, he became a labor contractor. In just 2 days, the construction of the City Lord Manor was completed. At the same time, the relay station was built. The moment the relay station was built, Ouyang Shua sent a letter to Xiao He. He briefly explained the situation of the fief and asked Xiao He to quickly deploy a batch of officials to Lion City before rushing to Friendship City by sea to take up their posts. The construction of Friendship City is related to the success or failure of the territory's ocean-going trade. The officials deployed by the administrative office should be capable and pragmatic. Remember this. Ouyang Shua exhorted in the letter. At the same time, Ouyang Shua ordered North Sea City's city guard, Gu Xiuwen, to take up the post of Friendship City city guard. When Shanghai City was promoted to a second-level county city, the valley's river channel was greatly widened. Merchant ships coming to and from Shanghai City could directly enter the city's pier. There was no need to make a detour through North Sea City. As a result, the strategic position of North Sea City, which had always been Shanghai City's gateway to the sea, was declining day by day. Gu Xiuwen was a capable general in the early days of the territory. He was highly regarded by Ouyang Shuo and had experience in managing coastal cities. He was the most suitable person to be the city lord of Friendship City. Although Friendship City was just a city, the rank of the city lord was equivalent to that of a prefectural magistrate. Apart from the officials, Ouyang Shuo also requested for a batch of skilled personnel that Somalia lacked. For example, architects, shipbuilders, steelmaking technicians, and so on. Officials and skilled personnel were only the usual configuration for the construction of a new city. This time, Ouyang Shuo broke the rules and requested for at least 20,000 immigrants from the territory to be transported to Friendship City by sea. For the sake of Friendship City, Ouyang Shuo was willing to go all out. The second letter was written to the 3 major intelligence agencies and the Chamberlain of Dependencies. He requested for the Shanghai Guards, Black Snake Guards, and the Military Intelligence Department to deploy a batch of capable personnel to Friendship City to build an intelligence station. The intelligence station in Friendship City can be used as a key stronghold for the territory to radiate to the entire African continent. It can even be a key stronghold for the European continent. You must put in a lot of effort to build it. Intelligence would always be at the forefront of the territory's expansion. The construction of Friendship City was undoubtedly the best opportunity for the territory to extend its intelligence network to Africa and Europe. For this reason, Ouyang Shuo was prepared to allocate another 400,000 gold coins for the expansion of the 3 major intelligence agencies. The Black Snake Guards were the focus of the support this time, and they would receive 200,000 gold coins directly. Although Ouyang Shuo did not want to dominate the world, it was very necessary for him to control the global situation. As for the Chamberlain of Dependencies, its mission was to continue attacking the Somali kingdom. Shanghai City and Somalia might be in a honeymoon period, but that was because the aftermath of the war had not dissipated. When the war completely cooled down, how the 2 sides would get along would be another question. Ouyang Shuo could not rely on just one battle achievement to act like a tyrant in Somalia. The right path was to completely tie the various forces in Somalia to the chariot of Shanghai City. After sending the letter, Ouyang Shuo finally had time to go to the governor's mansion and went straight to the meeting hall. Since Friendship City was a fief, it naturally had a territory stone tablet. As soon as the governor's mansion was built, a snow-white territory stone tablet appeared in the meeting hall. However, the territory stone tablet in Friendship City could not be leveled up, nor did it have any territorial characteristics. It could not even spawn refugees, so it was completely useless. However, Ouyang Shuo had a way. He came to the front of the stone tablet and took out a black command token. It was a black iron grade village creation token that had been fused with the fusion token. System announcement: player not wearing anything has been detected. You have a village creation token that can be fused with the territory stone tablet. Do you wish to fuse with it? Fuse. With a schwa, the village creation token turned into a ray of black light and fused with the white stone tablet. The black light dissipated, and the snow-white territory stone tablet was about to turn into a cold black color. System announcement: village creation token has successfully fused. Friendship City now has the authority to spawn refugees. Please choose the race of the refugee. Are you a Han refugee or a Somali refugee? Han refugee. Ouyang Shuo did not hesitate at all. System announcement: selection complete. From today onwards, refugees will be spawned. Although Ouyang Shuo planned to turn Friendship City into a large city, it was still a level 3 village and could only spawn 12 refugees every day. It's better than nothing. Ouyang Shuo sighed. Using the fusion token did not mean that he had gained a new territory. After fusing with the village creation token, Friendship City still did not have any territorial characteristics. As for the teleportation channel, it was impossible to use it, and it was just an isolated city. Ouyang Shual once again took out a scroll. Territory Title Scroll, Trade City. After using it, the territory will obtain the title Trade City, and it will gain the relevant territorial characteristics. He had obtained this scroll from the Star Nation's treasury, and now he could finally use it. System announcement. Player not wearing anything has been detected. You have a territory title scroll. Do you wish to use it? Yes. Another ray of white light flashed. System announcement. Congratulations to player not wearing anything. Friendship City has obtained the title of Trade City. Please check the stats yourself. Congratulations, player. Trade City. Increased trade fame by 25. Increased trade prosperity by 30. The stats were very simple and practical. It was a perfect match for Friendship City. Relying on refugees to increase the population of the territory was too inefficient, and it would not be able to develop Friendship City quickly. Ouyang Shua's plan was to recruit people. Apart from the 3,000 pirate orphans, there would also be a Navy camp stationed at the Brave Port. Some 6 sailors would also be settled in Friendship City. In this way, there would be around 10,000 people. In addition to the 20,000 or so future immigrants from Shanghai City, there would be around 30,000 people. For a large city, 30,000 people was still too little. Ouyang Shua had no choice but to turn his attention to the people of Somalia. The next day, the city lord's residents put up a recruitment notice. Anyone who is willing to settle in Friendship City will be given 1 gold as a settlement fee. The first batch of people to settle down will receive a 20% discount on the sale of their houses and shops. Now, it was time to see who would take the bait. Chapter 651. Ouyang Shua's letter caused a stir in Shanghai City. After reading the letter, Xiao He and the other officials were excited. There was no doubt that after conquering the Star Nation, the fleet led by the Marquis had won another key battle and achieved great results. When did the influence of the territory spread to the whole world? No one could give an exact answer to this question, but they could all clearly feel that Shanghai City was steadily advancing towards becoming the most influential territory in the world. Before the fleet set sail, the world in the eyes of Xiao He and the other scholars was the vast land of China. When the fleet came back with good news, they realized that the world was so vast. Their ambition was ignited again. We can't be a burden. Xiao He sighed. Sitting opposite Xiao, he was the head of the administrative bureau, Zhang Tingyu. The fact that Xiao He could chat with Zhang Tingyu so sincerely showed that this head of the administrative bureau had completely integrated into the circle of the protectorate of the southern border. The two of them had worked together for several months, and Xiao He really admired Zhang Tingyu. This colleague, who didn't speak much, was not only experienced in governing officials, but also had unique views. When faced with difficult problems, he would often be right. What was even rarer was that Zhang Tingyu was modest and never competed with others. When he disagreed with the other party's point of view, he would not immediately refute, but would smile faintly. It was this kind of smile that would often bring great pressure to the other party. Most of the time, Zhang Tingyu did not need to refute, and the other party would immediately lay down their arms and surrender. Zhang Tingyu's smile was one of the greatest weapons of the protectorate of the southern border. Perhaps it was because of the special era of the Qing dynasty, where the Manchu and Han ministers competed with each other everywhere. The biggest characteristic of Zhang Tingyu's handling of government affairs was that he was steady and could coordinate the interests of all parties. This was especially praised by Xiao He. Unlike Zhang Tingyu, in history, Xiao He was not only the prime minister, but also the prime minister. In the early Han dynasty, Xiao He was the #1 minister in the court, and his power made the prime ministers of the later generations sigh with emotion and wish that they could be born in such a beautiful era. This also caused Xiao He to develop a shortcoming, which was that he liked to act arbitrarily. If it was in the Han dynasty, such a shortcoming would not be a big deal. After all, no one could compete with Xiao He. However, they were now in Shanghai City. Not to mention the fact that the Marquis was a brilliant ruler with great vision and vision. He could not tolerate any arbitrary officials. Even the officials of the territory, especially the other three directors, were all famous prime ministers of the present age. The lineup of the protectorate of the southern region was several times more luxurious than that of the Darkhan dynasty. Moreover, all the important officials in Shanghai City were basically at the same starting line. None of them had made any contributions to the founding of the country. How could Xiaohe's prestige in Shanghai City be compared to that of the Han dynasty? Thus, it was inevitable that there would be some friction between Xiaohe, Fan Li, Wei Yang, and the other bureau chiefs due to disagreement. This was especially so when the Marquis was not in Shanghai City. At this time, Zhang Tingyu was the best lubricant, able to coordinate the contradictions of the four divisions. The cooperation between the two could be said to be extremely intimate. Hearing Xiaohe's lament, Zhang Tingyu smiled and did not reply. He turned around and took out a list of officials and began to discuss with Xiaohe the list of officials to be transferred to Friendship City. Since the Marquis had instructed them, the two of them naturally had to treat it seriously. The general process of selecting officials in the territory was that the Office of Personnel would first draw up a plan for the number of officials needed, then submit it to the four divisions for recommendation, and the Office of Personnel would then conduct a selection. The officials from the county magistrate and above would be directly decided by the Chief of Administration, Xiaohe. The officials above the county magistrate would need Xiaohe to convene the other three bureau chiefs to discuss and make a decision together. It could be seen that Xiaohe and Zhang Tingyu had the most say in the selection of officials. Under normal circumstances, even Ouyang Shuo would respect the decisions of the Office of Personnel and would not interfere with them, maintaining the authority of the Office of Personnel. Other than the Administrative Bureau, the three intelligence agencies, including the Chamberlain of Dependencies, had similar discussions. On the day that the secret letter was received, Shanghai City quickly started its operations. In less than 3 days, the recruitment of personnel was completed and the Second Fleet officially set sail. This time, there were more than 200 merchant ships accompanying the fleet. Without a doubt, they would be the first batch of people in the territory or even the China region in the ocean trade. If everything went smoothly, they would create a legend of becoming rich overnight. During the time when Ouyang Shuo was at sea, the China region was not peaceful. First, after the ice and snow melted, Lord Chunxin, Piao Linghuan, and Di Chun tried to expand their power to the Central Plains province, taking over the territory left by the Zhongchu regime last winter. They even wanted to capture Qin County in one fell swoop and completely destroy the Chun Sheng rebel army. At this moment, the situation suddenly changed. Chun Sheng, who had lived a miserable life for a winter, suddenly died. Xiang Yin, who was stationed in Chun County, took over Chun County and brazenly brought the surrounding counties under the rule of the West Chu regime. After lying dormant for more than half a year, West Chu finally revealed its fangs. Chun Sheng's sudden death and Xiang Yan's decisiveness were both unusual. At the same time, Xiang Yu, the hegemon king of West Chu, personally led his troops on a northern expedition, intending to destroy the Ludong city-state and occupy the entire Ludong province, establishing an unparalleled foundation for West Chu in the wilderness. Thus, the Central Plains was once again filled with the smoke of war. Among them, the most chaotic was the Central Plains province. After the sudden intervention of West Chu, Di Chun and the rest had doubts. They did not know what Xiang Yu, the hegemon king of West Chu, thought about the other territories in the Central Plains province. At this moment, Emperor Wu of Han, who had just taken over Luoyang City, made a move. Emperor Wu of Han directly announced that the surrounding counties of Luoyang City would be under the rule of Luoyang Royal City, forbidding any non-human lords from touching it. At the same time, Emperor Wu of Han was also very dissatisfied with Xiang Yan's occupation of Qin County. The war between Chu and Han was once again staged in the wilderness. The Central Plains province suddenly became the battlefield of the two giants, and undercurrents were surging. This made Di Chun and the rest even more frightened, and they were in a dilemma. On the other hand, Feng Xiuhuang led his troops out of the Central Plains province, showing that he did not want to be involved anymore. Feng Xiuhuang's strategic goal was to unify the Taiyuan province in 3 years of Gaia. In fact, Feng Xiuhuang was not the only one with such ambitions. Gaining control of a province in 3 years of Gaia seemed to have become the first choice of the giants. After all, with the dazzling achievements of Shanghai City in front of them, it was too shabby to occupy a county. Di Chun and the rest began to exert their strength and began to actively advance, constantly attacking cities and territories, doing their best to expand their territory. The China region was filled with smoke, and war broke out frequently, and the peaceful situation was once again completely broken. Others were still fine, but the strangest was the Guangxi province. Because the Guangxi province was occupied by the two giants, Military Kill Ripper and Piaolinghuan. As the saying goes, a mountain cannot accommodate two tigers. The battle between the two in 3 years of Gaia was becoming increasingly intense. The final result was that one of them would definitely be eliminated. Other than the Central Plains and the North, the South was not peaceful either. After the Huangchao rebel army was annihilated by Battle Wolf and Xiongba, the Huanan province once again fell into chaos. There were forces supported by Battle Wolf and Xiongba, and there were also newly established aristocratic families. That's right, aristocratic families. The aristocratic families of the South constantly appeared in the wilderness and began to participate in the battle in the wilderness. The Huanan province, which was in a gap, was naturally the best choice. In the end, it was a mess. Of course, the most eye-catching was the battle for Izhou Island. After Shanghai City took down Star Nation, the coastal lords realized the strategic role of the Navy. As a result, Izhou Island, which had always been isolated in the sea, suddenly entered the vision of the lords. Such an important strategic location was unexpectedly a barren land. The lords immediately understood, and their eyes suddenly became fiery. Among them, the most powerful contenders were Xiongba and Dragon seeking acupoint. Of the two of them, one was entrenched in the Jiangnan province and the other in the Minnan province. Since there was competition, war was inevitable. After all, no one was a gentleman and would voluntarily give up this piece of fat meat. Just a month ago, the navy of Overlord City and Dragon Seeking City fought on the sea. In the end, Dragon Seeking City relied on the warships that Shanghai City had previously supported and won by a slight advantage. Just when everyone thought that the dust had settled, there was another change in the situation. After Xiongba was defeated, he did not give up. He led a navy, quietly took a detour, and landed on the east coast of Izhou Island. As for Dragon Seeking City, they chose the west coast, which was close to the coast. As a result, the two territorial armies began to fight on the island from the naval confrontation. Until now, the battle was still in a stalemate. In this battle, because they did not receive instructions from Ouyang Shua, Shanghai City remained silent. In the China region, where the smoke of war was everywhere, Shanghai City was strangely calm. The three major armies of the territory were all quietly training in their respective areas. The only activity was the military competition. The main tone of Shanghai City at this time was development and construction. Millions of funds were invested, and the infrastructure of the territory was advancing at lightning speed. Basic education and basic medical care were also carried out in an orderly manner under Su Zhi's organization. The territory's trade was constantly breaking new records. Shanghai City was working hard, recuperating, practicing internal strength, and constantly consolidating the territory's foundation, deepening the territory's heritage, and accumulating enough strength for the next big outbreak. The silence at this time was only for the next time to amaze the world. It had to be said that Shanghai City was really maverick and could be said to outshine others in the China region. Of course, the premise was that the ocean-going fleet was not included. The ocean-going fleet, which had been at sea for less than a few months, created a lot of big news constantly reminding Di Chun and the others who were still fighting for their lives in the country that their opponents had not really stopped. As such, they were full of motivation. If Ouyang Shua knew that even if he went out to sea, he would still be able to spur on the domestic lords, who knew what he would think. He would probably only smile faintly. Chapter 652. Ouyang Shua had no time to pay attention to the changes in the country. After the relay station was built, the Black Snake Guard organized the recent major events in the country and reported them to Ouyang Shua. Ouyang Shua finished reading and didn't give any instructions. Ouyang Shua had no intention of getting involved in the ongoing Ijo Island dispute. Since Shanghai City had decided to rest and recuperate, it was only natural that they would remain silent until the end. Let the Allies deal with their own matters. Ouyang Shua sighed. Ouyang Shua was slightly interested in Zhang Yi's letter. In the matter of driving a wedge between the four major city-states, the Chamberlain of Dependencies, in addition to bribery, framing, and sowing dissension, had cleverly used the good card of the Bank of the Four Seas. The Bank of the Four Seas was on the right track, and their savings had long broken through the 50 million mark. Such a large sum of money naturally had to be lent out. Apart from the alliance, the bank was officially open to other lords. In fact, if guilds, chambers of commerce, and other organizations were short of funds, they could get a loan from the Bank of the Four Seas if they had a good reputation. With money coming in and going out, the Bank of the Four Seas had already earned huge profits. The main lenders were still the lords. However, any lord with ambition would never have enough funds for his territory. How could the lords of the four major city-states be an exception? They also need to borrow money. Zhang Yi used this to move freely among them. As expected of the genius of the school of vertical and horizontal, Zhang Yi's vision was unparalleled. July 10th, Somalia, Friendship City. After more than half a month of construction, the desolate valley had completely changed. Circling around the foot of the mountain, one could see the outline of the city wall, which was built with boulders mined on the spot. The Brave Port in the north had also been replaced with new equipment. The docks on the east and west sides had been completed. The merchant ships no longer had to stop at the port in a chaotic manner. Everything was in order. Inside the valley, there were many tents. Somalia was already very hot in July. The craftsmen and coolies did not have to live in special houses. They could get by with a simple tent made from a few pieces of rags. At the center of the tents were temporary canteens. In order to ensure the progress of the construction, Ouyang Shua specially instructed the officials in charge of food and lodging to ensure that the food was the best. Not only did he have to ensure that they were full, but he also had to pay attention to their nutrition. Meat for every meal. This was the greatest happiness of the craftsmen. With such generous treatment, how could the craftsmen not work hard? The overall progress of the project was 4 to 5 days ahead of Ouyang Shua's expectations. The construction of the fief was completely on the right track. The government officials, skilled talents, and immigrants from the territory were currently sailing on the Indian Ocean. It was estimated that they would arrive at Friendship City in 10 days. Ouyang Shua didn't plan to wait any longer. Seeing that half of Gaia's 3 years had passed, Ouyang Shua had to make the best use of his time to complete the voyage. Before leaving, Ouyang Shua did 3 things. The first thing he did was to establish the Friendship City's City Guard Brigade. After the barracks were built, Ouyang Shua selected a group of strong and fierce warriors from the coolies who settled down in Friendship City and changed their occupation to saber and shield soldiers. Ouyang Shua then chose a group of officers from the Navy's sword and shield troops to join the City Guard Brigade as platoon commanders and battalion commanders. As for the commander of the City Guard Brigade, it was a squad leader of the Divine Guards. In this way, the City Defense Force of Friendship City was finally established. In addition to the craftsmen and coolies that were recruited, as well as the merchants and skilled talents that came from other places to seek refuge, the population of Friendship City had yet to break the 100,000 mark. At present, a City Guard Brigade was enough to deter thieves and thieves. The second thing was to finalize the overall plan of Friendship City. Ouyang Shua organized his plans for Friendship City into a document and handed it to the design team that was rushing over. The position of Friendship City was very clear. It was a purely commercial capital. The Brave Port was not the best port on the Afro-Asian sea route, nor was it the best port in the Gulf of Aden. However, Friendship City would be the most open, most complete, and most favorable commercial capital. Ouyang Shua's plan for Friendship City only had two districts, east and west, separated by a central street in the middle. The East District was designated as the Commercial District. The docks, bulk goods distribution center, logistics center, settlement center, labor market, bank, and bulk goods trading center were all built in the Commercial District. In short, all the facilities in the Commercial District were designed around ocean trade. The goal was to make ocean trade in Friendship City more convenient, efficient, and safe. The West District was designated as the Service District. Other than taking out a portion of the land to build residential areas, the rest of the land would be used to build bars, inns, brothels, gambling dens, night markets, restaurants, auction houses, and other commercial buildings. All kinds of entertainment venues would also cover high, medium, and low levels to meet the consumption needs of different groups of people. There is no doubt that the West District would be a paradise for merchants and sailors to enjoy themselves. As long as you had money and were willing to spend it, you would be the real god in the West District. In addition, a large number of shops and warehouses would be built in the West District, mainly to sell supplies related to the fleet, such as fresh water, food, meat, medicine, and so on. Ouyang Shua's slogan was that all supplies for the fleet could be taken care of in Friendship City. There's nothing you can't think of, but there's nothing you can't buy. It could be said that the entire city was built around ocean trade. If everything was completed, it would be a real commercial capital. For this, Ouyang Shua set aside 500,000 gold coins to fill the Friendship City's finances. A rough calculation showed that Ouyang Shua's investment in Friendship City had reached a huge amount of 1 million gold coins. Now he had to look forward to whether Friendship City could create a commercial miracle. The third thing that Ouyang Shua did was to let the ocean fleet allocate 100 cannons for Friendship City. These 100 cannons would all be placed on the northern city wall, their muzzles aimed at the port. Friendship City was surrounded by mountains on three sides, and the only way to connect to the outside world was through the Brave Port. There was an organized navy in the military port, and with the deterrence of the 100 cannons, it was enough to suppress all thieves. With this, Ouyang Shua could leave with peace of mind. On the 11th of July, the ocean fleet set off again. Ouyang Shua did not inform anyone when he set off. He left quietly to start a new journey. He did not know what kind of challenges awaited this fleet that was destined to go down in history. The fleet passed through the Mandeb Strait and directly entered the Red Sea. The Red Sea was located in the northeast of Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. It was long and narrow, and was connected to the Mediterranean Sea through the Suez Canal to the northwest and the Gulf of Aden through the Mandeb Strait to the south. At the same time, the Red Sea was also the saltiest sea in the world, and it was an important oil transportation channel in the world. In reality, the Middle East Gulf was known as the world's oil depot, and its oil reserves accounted for 2/3 of the world's total reserves. This setting was also continued in the game, and it was rich in oil reserves. At this time, oil was only called fierce oil in China, and it was only used as a supplementary resource in war. Even England, the cradle of the Industrial Revolution, was still in the embryonic stage of the first Industrial Revolution. The iconic invention of the steam engine was also just recently born. The first Industrial Revolution gave rise to the steel industry and textile industry. What really made oil shine was the Second Industrial Revolution. With the invention of the internal combustion engine, industry was electrified, and cars and airplanes were put on the stage of history. At that time, there would be a huge demand for oil. Ouyang Shua doubted that the game could advance to the Second Industrial Revolution in 10 years. At least in the 5 years of his previous life, even the steam engine wasn't popularized in the world. Therefore, the use of oil was very low, and the demand wasn't high. This was not good news for the Middle East countries. Of course, the Mediterranean countries had more than just oil. They also had a long history. Among the four ancient civilizations, Babylon and Egypt were both located around the Mediterranean. Needless to say, the Roman Empire, Macedonian Empire, Persian Empire, and Arab Empire had all interacted with the countries around the Mediterranean. Egypt's Cairo, Greece's Athens, and Italy's Rome all had a long history, and in the depths of their palaces lived an ancient emperor. Darius I, Alexander the Great, Gaves Octavius Augustus. Each of these emperors had a great reputation and were comparable to the Qin dynasty and the Han dynasty. In a game like Earth on Le, having a long history was equivalent to having a deep foundation. Using this opportunity, the rulers of these countries would try to restore the glory of the empires in history. They were all active figures on the global stage. Therefore, Ouyang Shah didn't have any ambitions for the Mediterranean countries. His only goal was to open up ocean trade with these countries and nothing else. That was why Ouyang Shah chose to establish his foundation in Somalia early. The Red Sea wasn't red, but a sea of blue. The fleet passed through the Red Sea, passed through the Gulf of Suez, and arrived at the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal had existed since ancient times, and, of course, it was only built in 1869. It was a sea-level waterway that connected the Isthmus of Suez in Egypt, connecting the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea. It provided the shortest route from Europe to the Indian Ocean and Western Pacific Ocean, and was one of the most frequently used routes in the world. At the same time, the Suez Canal was the border between Asia and Africa, and was the main route between Asia, Africa, and Europe. The canal stretched from Port Said in the north to Suez in the south, spanning 190 kilometers. It dug into the Mediterranean Sea to the south of Suez and the north of Port Said. The completion of the Suez Canal turned the African peninsula into the African continent. Egypt spanned across Asia and Africa, and trade between Southwest Asia, Northeast Africa, and Southern Europe became busier. Chapter 653. On the 15th of July, the fleet passed through the Suez Canal and stopped for a while in Alexandria, Egypt. After resupplying, they set sail again and began to cross the Mediterranean Sea. The Mediterranean Sea was the oldest sea in the world. Its history was even older than the Atlantic Ocean. It was the birthplace of ancient Egypt and Babylon, as well as the birthplace of European civilization. While crossing the Mediterranean, the fleet stopped at every important port for a day or two. One was to conduct trade, selling all the tea leaves and porcelain brought from China, as well as the spices and peppers purchased from Southeast Asia. Whether it was in ancient times or in games, these products were very popular in the West. The main buyers were not the players, but the native nobles of the capital. The rarer something was, the greater its value. Even if the price of tea and porcelain had increased tenfold, they were still very popular. Along the way, the fleet would also purchase some Western specialty goods, such as clocks, pocket watches, glass products, and specialty gems such as diamonds, agates, and cat's eye stones. These goods can be sold at a good price when they are shipped back to the country. The second was to set up scouts along the way. The accompanying Black Snake Guard intelligence officers would establish intelligence stations in various places. Black Snake's strategy was to cooperate with the local snakes and spend a lot of gold coins to purchase information from them. Otherwise, the yellow-skinned Black Snake Guards would be too conspicuous in the various countries. Of course, his ultimate goal was to subjugate the local tyrants and make them serve Shanghai City loyally. The collected intelligence would be sent to Friendship City, which would then report it to the headquarters. There was naturally no need to worry about the specifics of the transaction. The trip to the Mediterranean Sea was both a trade trip and a sightseeing trip for Ouyang Shah. Every time Ouyang Shah arrived at a place, he would bring a team of guards to tour the classical Mediterranean. In Athens, Ouyang Shah visited the Parthenon temple that Gaia had reconstructed and met the goddess Athena. In Rome, Ouyang Shah visited the Pantheon and even watched a beast fight in the Roman Colosseum, where he met the Spartan warriors. The Mediterranean Sea countries were generally quite friendly towards Shanghai City's fleet. To be honest, when the fleet attacked Star Nation, the image of the fleet was indeed that of an invader and a warmonger in the eyes of the lords of the world. But in Somalia, the ocean-going fleet fought a beautiful turnaround. After assisting the Somali players in defeating the pirates, he was conferred the title of Honorary Knight by the Somali Kingdom, instantly improving the image of the fleet. When passing by Spain, the ocean-going fleet encountered the Spanish fleet. At this time, the Spanish fleet had already begun to show the majesty of a great maritime power in history. The entire Mediterranean Sea was regarded as Spain's internal lake, allowing it to roam freely. Historically, it was with the support of the Spanish royal family that Columbus discovered the American continent. From then on, the famous Spanish invincible fleet ruled for an era. The eastern and western fleets met, and the atmosphere was a little strange. Like the ocean-going fleet, the Spanish fleet was already equipped with cannons. Moreover, these cannons were definitely more advanced than the cumbersome cannons of the ocean-going fleets. If they were to really fight, both sides would probably suffer. Fortunately, the worst outcome did not occur. After greeting each other, the two fleets passed by each other. Thinking about it, the Spanish fleet had not completely controlled the Mediterranean Sea, and they did not want to complicate matters. Don't forget that Spain's neighbor, Portugal, was also a maritime power in history. The battle between the two fleets in the Mediterranean Sea would probably be more interesting. After crossing the Spanish Sea, they arrived at the Strait of Gibraltar. The Strait of Gibraltar is located between the southernmost part of Spain and northwestern Africa. It is an important gateway connecting the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean, with a length of about 90 kilometers. The narrowest part of the strait is only 13 kilometers, and the widest part of the strait is 43 kilometers. The shallowest part is 301 meters deep, and the deepest part is 1,181 meters deep. The average depth is about 375 meters. The current from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea through the Strait of Gibraltar is 4 kilometers per hour. In the early years, it was used by Atlantic navigators to quickly pass through the strait into the Mediterranean Sea. When the fleet arrived at the Strait of Gibraltar, Ouyang Shua's expression changed. He remembered the large-scale storyline mission that shocked the world in his previous life, the Lost Atlantis. It was said that Atlantis was a powerful and wealthy empire, the world's first developed civilization. The earliest description of Atlantis appeared in the ancient Greek philosopher Plato's dialogues. Plato described Atlantis for the first time in the form of a dialogue. Around 9,000 years ago, on the opposite side of the stone pillar of Hercules, there was a land surrounded by the sea. This was the kingdom of Atlantis. At that time, Atlantis was about to start a war with Athens, but unexpectedly, Atlantis suddenly encountered an earthquake and flood. In less than a day and night, it completely sank to the bottom of the sea, becoming an obstacle for the Greeks to travel by sea. The stone pillar of Hercules was in the area of the Strait of Gibraltar. According to legend, Atlantis regarded itself as the people of the god of the sea and had a strong worship of the sea. It coexisted with the Lemurian civilization on Earth at that time. The Lemurian civilization was located on an ancient continent northeast of what is now Australia. 10,000 years ago, the two civilizations succumbed to a world-destroying flood. In the works of the Native Americans, there was a similar narrative. There were 4 generations of humans on Earth. The first generation of humans was a generation of giants. They were not residents of this place, but came from the sky. They perished due to hunger. The second generation of humans perished due to a huge fire. The third generation of humans were ape men. They perished due to killing each other. Later, the fourth generation of humans appeared. They were humans in the sun and water stage. The human civilization in this stage was destroyed by a huge flood. The legendary Atlantean civilization and the Lemurian civilization were the fourth generation of humans. Modern science discovered that before the Great Flood, there might have been a continent on Earth. This continent already had a highly developed civilization. In a global disaster, the continent sank into the Atlantic Ocean. The cause of the disaster was a large-scale earthquake and the tsunami that followed. The volcanic ash caused the entire Mediterranean region to be in darkness for several weeks. Plants as far away as England were also affected. The power of the earthquake was equivalent to 4,000 times the power of the Hiroshima atomic bomb. In the past century, archaeologists had found traces of prehistoric civilization at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, which seemed to confirm this hypothesis. The scientific community continued to use the name suggested by Plato, Atlantis. In the game, Gaia had perfectly recreated this legend. Ouyang Shuo clearly remembered that at the end of the 4th year of Gaia in his previous life, a Spanish adventurer went out to sea alone. Unfortunately, he encountered a storm, and the ship capsized and sank to the bottom of the sea. Fortunately, the player named Gerald Bick had a special item, underwater breathing device. Its function was similar to the water repellent pearl in China's myths and legends. It allowed the player to move underwater for a long time. By chance, Bick discovered the sunken city of Atlantis. As a result, a large-scale plot mission was initiated that caused a sensation throughout Europe. Gerald Bick was just a trigger. Hundreds of thousands of players participated in the mission. Basically, all the countries along the Mediterranean coast were involved in this plot mission. In the end, the island of Atlantis rose from the bottom of the sea and took root in the Mediterranean Sea. The vanished Atlantis civilization also reappeared in the world. The lucky Bick became the #1 player among the Spanish players. His brilliance overshadowed that of the feudal lords. Thinking of this, a glimmer of hope flashed in Ouyang Shuo's eyes. Ouyang Shuo did not have a water-repellent pearl, but he had a mysterious partner, Little Green. In Friendship City, Little Green, who had swallowed the white lion's inner core, had woken up and evolved into a quasi-divine beast. After this evolution, Little Green was completely reborn. Name, Little Green Quasi-Divine Beast, belonging, Cliff Mountain City Territory Guardian Beast Race, Black Jade Chelan, Chelan Subspecies, Combat Power, Gold, High Quality, Talent, Water Manipulation, Combat Power increases by 80 in the water, unimpeded in the sea. Skills, Bloody Massacre, increase kill value by 85. Sprint, increase attack power by 85. Characteristics, Deterrence, increase territorial security by 35. Natural Deterrence to sea beasts, increase territorial security by 40. Guardian, increase territorial defense by 25. Techniques, Black Chelan, 7 transformations, Hell Scripture, techniques and skills. Sky Strike, shoots out a bolt of electricity that has a paralyzing effect. Evaluation, an evil beast from ancient myths and legends. It is said to be the offspring of an evil dragon and a black Chelan. It is ferocious in nature. Swallowed the inner core of the white lion and completed 1 evolution. Its bloodline was upgraded to a Chelan subspecies. As a territory guardian beast, it can continue to activate the Chelan bloodline and evolve again. To be honest, Ouyang Shuo was surprised that Little Green did not evolve into a divine beast. It could only be said that compared to the Chelan divine beast, a guardian beast like the white lion could only be considered a subspecies. After all, the spirit of the old Chelan that died on that nameless island had great magical powers. In comparison, the white lion's performance did not live up to its name. There is a world of difference between divine beasts. Because of this, although Little Green had swallowed the white lion's inner core, it had only evolved into a Chelan subspecies. Fortunately, it was only 1 step away from becoming a real Chelan. Apart from its identity as a territory guardian beast, the Black Chelan 7 transformations Hell Scripture that Little Green had learned at the Spirit Beast Pavilion was the key to Little Green's evolution. The white lion's inner core was just a catalyst. After this evolution, Little Green's attributes had undergone an earth-shattering change. Not only had it awakened the powerful talent, water manipulation, but its original skills and characteristics had also been greatly strengthened. After the evolution, Little Green's title of Overlord of the Sea was even more true. Therefore, to the current Little Green, diving into the sea was a piece of cake. The only difficulty was that Ouyang Shuo could not confirm the exact location of the Atlantis ruins. Finding a submerged city in the vast sea was easier said than done. Chapter 654, July 24th, Port of Gibraltar. The Port of Gibraltar was located on the northern shore of the Strait of Gibraltar. It was just a small port. The fleet stayed at the port for 3 days, but there was still no progress in searching for Atlantis. The long stay of the fleet had aroused the vigilance of the Spanish fleet. Ouyang Shuo could clearly feel that there were more and more Spanish warships patrolling the waters of the port. "Let's search for another day. If we can't find it, we'll leave." Ouyang Shuo sighed. Although he had marked a specific area for Little Greenie according to the information on the forum in his previous life, finding it would still require great luck. The night before leaving, Little Greenie finally came back with something similar to a gas mask in its mouth. Ouyang Shuo was overjoyed when he saw it. He knew that Atlantis had finally been found. This gas mask and the special item that Bick had obtained in his previous life were all unique to the Atlantis civilization. Its real name was Underwater Breathing Apparatus. With it, players could move freely under the sea. "Good job." Ouyang Shuo removed the underwater breathing apparatus from Little Greenie's mouth and gave it a thumbs up. Even though Little Greenie was a quasi-divine beast, it was still very tired after searching for 4 days and 4 nights. In order to find Atlantis, the little guy had gone all out. It must have suffered a lot. Nien, the little guy, was very proud. It raised its head 45 degrees to the sky, but the satisfaction in its eyes could not be concealed. The funny thing was that although Little Greenie had evolved into a Chilean subspecies, its cry was still the cry of a Nien beast. The human and the beast were abnormally harmonious. Suddenly, Ouyang Shuo's eyes narrowed. Only then did he notice that Little Greenie's back was bleeding. A large part of its back was rotten. All the scales had fallen off, revealing the flesh and even the bones inside. The little guy did not even make a sound after suffering such a serious injury. Ouyang Shuo's knowledge was very sharp. He immediately recognized that the wound was not caused by a battle with a giant beast. It was caused by a firearm, or more accurately, by a cannon. Who did this? Ouyang Shuo could not conceal the anger in his voice. "Woo!" Little Greenie turned its head and looked outside the port. Ouyang Shuo looked up and saw a Spanish warship sailing over quickly. Faint clamors could be heard coming from the ship. "It's them." Ouyang Shuo had already determined that the culprit was the Spanish fleet. Nien, Little Qing nodded, unable to conceal the hatred in her eyes. Ouyang Shuo's agitated emotions suddenly calmed down, and a gentle smile appeared on his face. He rubbed Little Qing's head and said, "Little fellow, don't worry. I'll take revenge for you. Go and bandage your wounds first." Woo-woo. Little Qing obediently left with the military doctor, who rushed over. Ouyang Shuo's eyes turned completely cold as he sent Little Qing off. He didn't even turn his head as he indifferently said, "Pass down my order. Everyone is to be present. The fleet is to immediately enter the first-level combat readiness state." "Yes, sir." Chun Damong, who had been following behind Ouyang Shuo, was also furious when he saw Little Qing's miserable state. In the Battle of the Star Nation, Little Qing displayed her divine might and killed the White Lion in one fell swoop, attracting the attention of this group of boorish soldiers. Now that their treasure was being bombarded by cannons, how could they not be furious? Chun Damong bowed and strode away. In less than 10 minutes, the entire fleet was completely woken up. After the fleet entered the Mediterranean Sea, they've been deliberately keeping a low profile under Ouyang Shuo's request. When they docked at the port, they'd appeared as a trade fleet, and they didn't carry the slightest smell of gunpowder. Now it was time to unsheathe their swords. Archers, shield soldiers, cannoneers, and other types of soldiers quickly took their positions. The Golden Dragon war flag fluttered in the wind, and the war drums beat. Ouyang Shuo's life motto was, "If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If people offend me, I won't spare a single soldier." Just as the fleet was getting ready to set off, the Spanish warship rushed into the port and headed straight for Dragon Head. On the warship, A middle-aged man with a full beard and a white hat on his head shouted at Dragonhead with an arrogant attitude. "Hey, have you seen a green monster?" This person actually didn't care about the fleet at all. It was no wonder that this person was so arrogant. The Spanish treated the Mediterranean Sea as their backyard. The port of Gibraltar was also in Spanish territory, which further encouraged their arrogance. Restoring the glory of the powerful maritime countries had always been the long-cherished wish of the Spanish players. In their eyes, how could the backward eastern countries compare to their invincible naval fleet? "Little Ching was injured by you guys?" Ouyang Shua's tone was calm. "Little Ching?" The middle-aged man couldn't wrap his head around it. Then his eyes lit up, and he said excitedly, yes, it's that green monster. Damn it, it actually managed to escape after taking a shot from us. It's obviously something extraordinary. We can definitely sell it for a good price if we capture it. Where's that beast now?" Hearing this, Dragonhead's 20 cannons were all aimed at the Spanish warship. Ouyang Shua looked at him as if he was looking at a dead man. "It's my contracted beast." Ugh. The middle-aged man came to his senses. At least he wasn't completely bewitched by lust. Since that's the case, forget it. But next time, keep your contracted beast in check. Don't let it run around. Go back. The middle-aged man turned around and ordered. Ouyang Shua shook his head. "What? You want to leave just like that after injuring my contracted beast? What do you want? Don't forget that this is the Mediterranean Sea. It's our Spanish territory." The middle-aged man's attitude was still arrogant, and his tone was a little stiff. It wasn't easy to encounter an exotic beast, but in the end, it was all for naught. This already made the middle-aged man rather depressed. In his opinion, not forcefully taking the green monster was already giving the other party face. Who would have thought that the other party's intentions would be so unforgiving? "Leave your life behind." Ouyang Shua's voice was still calm. "Huh." The middle-aged man looked as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. "Is your brain fried?" Ouyang Shua shook his head. He was already unwilling to waste his breath. "Fire!" Zheng He tactfully ordered immediately. The rumbling sound of the cannons drowned out the middle-aged man's mockery, fear, and curses. Dragonhead's sudden attack caught the Spanish warship off guard. Before it could even retaliate, it was sunk by the cannons. The invincible warship slowly sank to the bottom of the sea. Along with it, the so-called glory of Spain sank. The other Spanish warships patrolling the waters around the port immediately reacted when they heard the rumbling sound of the cannons. They quickly assembled and aggressively sailed toward the port. "Get into formation," Zheng He ordered. The flag waved, and the ocean-going fleet, which had been docked side by side, quickly changed into a battle formation. The world-famous swallow-spreading wings formation of the Ming Dynasty first appeared in the Mediterranean Sea. "Attack!" The fleet quickly left the port and rushed toward the opposite Spanish warships. There were only more than 20 Spanish warships patrolling the periphery of the port, which was not enough in front of the ocean-going fleet. They dared to rush over because they relied on the support of the Spanish Invincible Fleet. In their opinion, the ocean-going fleet of Shanghai City did not dare to provoke a full-scale war between the two sides. They rushed over in a hurry, just to seek justice for the warship that was sunk. But they were wrong. Ouyang Shua knew that when the first Spanish warship was sunk, the contradiction between the two sides was irreconcilable. The ocean-going fleet came with the desire of peaceful trade, but it did not mean that they had a compromise. True peace often needed to go through the baptism of war. Blindly admitting weakness could not be exchanged for peace. If Shanghai City wanted to completely open the Grand Line, it could not bypass the Spanish fleet entrenched in the Mediterranean Sea. Originally, Ouyang Shua was not ready to show his cards to the other side so soon, but the development of the situation did not allow Ouyang Shua to think too much. He must fight back. Since I have done it, I might as well do it thoroughly. Ouyang Shua muttered to himself. It's time to let the proud Spaniards realize that their so-called glory has long been outdated. The Mediterranean Sea, not the Spanish Mediterranean Sea. To maintain the smooth ocean trade route, the Shanghai City Navy must deploy warships in the Mediterranean Sea, show their muscles, and show their existence. Ouyang Shua had not found an opportunity before. The Little Qing incident was undoubtedly an excellent opportunity, and Ouyang Shua would not miss it. Now that the situation had evolved, revenge for Little Qing had become a secondary factor. 1 hour. Only 1 hour. More than 20 Spanish warships that rushed up were wiped out, and the wreckage of the warships floated on the sea. After receiving the news, the port of Gibraltar was in complete chaos. Presumably, the main force of the Spanish Invincible Fleet had received the news at this time and was rushing here. "Marquis, what should we do next?" Zheng He asked. Although the ocean-going fleet had won this battle, Zheng He's expression was not relaxed. Strictly speaking, this was the first time the ocean-going fleet had fought against an opponent of the same level. The Spanish fleet was equipped with cannons and muskets, and be it in quantity or quality, they were a level higher than the ocean-going fleet. Although the ocean-going fleet had to pay the price of 3 Taurus fighting ships and more than 10 Scarlet horseboats in order to eliminate the opponent, they had to pay the price. The result of the battle was enough to wake Zheng He up. The ocean-going fleet still had a long way to go in the future, and it was not an easy task to truly dominate the ocean. After all, the strongest fleet in Europe was not the Spanish fleet, but the British fleet. Take down the port of Gibraltar first, and prepare for a tough battle, Ouyang Shua ordered. Understood, Zheng He nodded. The port of Gibraltar was only a small port, and although its strategic location was excellent, it could not withstand the cannons of the ocean-going fleet. That afternoon, the port was completely under the rule of Shanghai City. At the same time, a system announcement rang in the ears of the Spanish players. System announcement: China Region's Lord Wu Yi has led his troops to capture the port of Gibraltar, initiating a national war. Spain has entered a national war mode, and Madrid has entered a state of level 2 alert. Please check the specific situation yourself. Chapter 655. Spain was a constitutional monarchy located in the southwest of Europe. In modern history, Spain was an important cultural birthplace. During the Renaissance, it was the most powerful country in Europe. From the middle of the 15th century to the end of the 16th century, Spain became an empire that influenced the whole world. The number of countries that use Spanish as their official language ranked second in the world, second only to English. Spain had a total of more than 4 million players and a vast territory. It was considered a powerful country in Europe. In comparison, the star nation that was destroyed by Shanghai City seemed insignificant. No matter how confident Ouyang Shua was, he wasn't arrogant enough to conquer Spain in one fell swoop. He had no choice but to start a war. The purpose of Ouyang Shua's strategy was to prevent the national war from turning into an all-out war, but also to give the Spanish Invincible Fleet a painful lesson, to knock away their arrogance, and to make the Spanish maintain enough reverence for Shanghai City. To be honest, it was very difficult. It was hard to say if they could defeat the Spanish Invincible Fleet with just one formation. Not to mention, there would be a large number of Spanish players participating in the war. It would be lucky for the Spanish fleet to escape unscathed. Ouyang Shua wasn't a reckless person. When he destroyed the first Spanish battleship, he was indeed angry and didn't think too much. But when he decided to destroy the 20 Spanish fleets nearby, Ouyang Shua already had a plan in mind. His trump card was the Atlantis City. In his previous life, the large-scale storyline mission, The Lost Atlantis, involved hundreds of thousands of players. Ouyang Shua carefully recalled the information about the quest that was revealed on the forum. He was confident that he could complete the storyline quest on his own. Not to mention the mission reward, the situation would be very different if Atlantis reappeared in the Mediterranean Sea. That night, Ouyang Shua took an ordinary ship and left the Strait of Gibraltar with Little Qing and the Divine Martial Guards, heading straight for the sea where Atlantis was located. Ouyang Shua was calm, but Spain was in an uproar. The Spanish players didn't expect that the Shanghai City fleet would have the guts to initiate a war. Knowing that more than 20 battleships had been sunk by Shanghai City and even the port of Gibraltar had been captured, the Spanish players were even more furious and clamored for revenge. At the end of the 16th century, Spain's invincible fleet was defeated by the British Navy, led by the pirate Drake. From then on, Spain lost its status as a maritime power and began to decline. In the mid-17th century, Spain ceded Gibraltar to Britain during the War of the Spanish Succession. Until the 21st century, Gibraltar was still under British control. Spain once tried to take Gibraltar from the British, but to no avail. It was only after the establishment of the Earth Federation that the matter was left unsettled. It could be said that Gibraltar was a scar on Spain. In the game, Gaia had assigned Gibraltar to Spain based on the principle of proximity. Now that it was occupied by the Shanghai City fleet, it immediately stirred a sensitive nerve among the Spanish. Let the arrogant Easterners pay the price. Chase Shanghai City's fleet out of the Mediterranean Sea, the Spanish player declared. Spain's coastline was long, and more than half of the country's borders were coastlines. Coupled with the country's glorious naval history, the most powerful Spanish lords were basically coastal lords. The Spanish invincible fleet was just a general term, not a specific fleet. This was because the Spanish lords had more than 30 fleets under their command. In addition, even the players' guilds in the country liked to form fleets and go out to sea together for adventures. In his previous life, the Lucky Bic was the leader of a small mercenary group. Early the next morning, the various fleets spontaneously gathered at the Strait of Gibraltar. Shanghai City occupied the port of Gibraltar, but Zheng He's fleet did not plan to fight the Spanish fleet head-on. That would be too foolish, and it was obvious that they would not win. Zheng He's strategy was to use the superior mobility of Shanghai City's fleet to launch a surprise attack at sea. In a short period of time, it would be difficult to determine the victor between the two fleets. Strait of Gibraltar, a nameless sea area. Under Little Green's guidance, Ouyang Shua's battleship finally arrived at its destination. Little Green was indeed a quasi-divine beast. After applying top-grade medicine on its back, the wound had already scabbed over after a night and could enter the water again. As he was not sure of the situation at the bottom of the sea, Ouyang Shu did not dare to rashly head there alone. Therefore, he had to get Little Green to dive to the bottom of the sea again to collect more underwater breathing apparatus. Although the underwater breathing apparatus was powerful, it was a common item in Atlantis City. Atlantis worshipped the sea god Poseidon. So many of their technological products were related to the sea. Underwater breathing apparatus was just one of the gadgets. When Atlantis sank to the bottom of the sea, underwater breathing apparatus were scattered all over the city ruins. If players wanted to participate in the large-scale storyline mission, The Lost Atlantis, they had to obtain an underwater breathing apparatus, dive to the bottom of the sea, and enter the city ruins personally. In his previous life, there were players who made a lot of money just by selling underwater breathing apparatus. Ouyang Shu gave Little Green a large net and hung it around its neck. In less than half an hour, Little Green returned with a large net filled with underwater breathing apparatus. After a rough count, there were more than 300 of them. Fortunately, Little Green was brave. Otherwise, it would not have been easy to drag such heavy things in the water. After going back and forth 4 times, each of the Shenwu guards had an underwater breathing apparatus. Let's go. Ouyang Shu put on the underwater breathing apparatus and was the first to jump into the sea, creating a splash. Then, like dumplings falling into a pot, 1,000 Shenwu guards and their personal guards jumped into the sea and dived towards the bottom of the sea. The warship that carried them immediately left to avoid attracting the attention of the Spanish fleet. The seawater of the Strait of Gibraltar was clear, and the environment was excellent. Coupled with Gaia's optimization in the game and the lack of industrial pollution, it was more like a fairyland. In the azure, blue seawater, colorful fishes swam back and forth in groups. Seeing Ouyang Shu and his party, they were not afraid and actually came over excitedly. On the other hand, the sea monsters and giant beasts had already escaped without a trace when they sensed Little Green's aura. Ouyang Shu saw this and smiled. Speaking of which, this was Ouyang Shu's first time diving. He had never enjoyed such treatment in real life, let alone diving in the open sea. Furthermore, he did not need to carry heavy diving equipment. After putting on the underwater breathing apparatus, Ouyang Shuo felt like he had transformed into a fish and was swimming in the sea. He rode on Little Green and slowly swam towards the bottom of the sea. After diving for a few hundred meters, the water pressure kept increasing. The magical effect of the underwater breathing apparatus was once again demonstrated. Not only could it provide oxygen, but could also automatically adjust the water pressure. Even when diving deep into the sea, Ouyang Shuo could not feel the existence of the water pressure at all. At 1,000 meters, he could see the real underwater continent. The bottom of the strait in the game was still clear, and the mysterious city of Atlantis slowly appeared in Ouyang Shuo's vision. The legendary city of Atlantis was designed in the shape of concentric circles, separated by warships. As one went deeper into the center, the identity restrictions gradually became stricter. The inner circle of the circle was the most important temple and reserve. For Atlantis, 3 was one of its important characteristics. The lines repeated 3 times. The buildings formed by 3 similar buildings, and the 3 pyramids formed a group of towers. The streets of every level of the city were distributed diagonally, from one corner of the beach to the other. There were many complicated underground corridors. The capital of Atlantis, Poseidonia, represented the essence of the great Western continent. It was the concentrated embodiment of culture, art, and craftsmanship. It was a monumental city, a model for other countries. However, what appeared in Ouyang Shuo's eyes was the ruins of a huge city. In the azure seawater, there were dilapidated temples, giant round pillars that had fallen to the left and right, and huge sculptures that had fallen into the mud. The standing sculptures were also incomplete, and the spears in their hands had been broken into 2. Everything seemed to be telling of the decline of a civilization. A desolate and tragic feeling assaulted Ouyang Shuo's senses. He could even smell the scent of time, decayed, broken, and heartless. Even so, Ouyang Shuo could still glimpse the glory and splendid civilization of Atlantis from the ruins. The city had a well-planned municipal system, exquisite sculptures, and great buildings. Even the most ordinary of stones were carved with unknown and beautiful patterns. Without a doubt, this was a great civilization. Unfortunately, corals, seaweed, and other vegetation had already quietly climbed up the walls, pillars, and sculptures. They had taken root and gradually cultivated a new ecosystem. Schools of fish swam freely among the broken walls of the city, and there was no lack of overlords of the sea like sharks. The entire city glowed with a different kind of vitality. The protagonists of the city, the Atlanteans, were nowhere to be seen. Even sharks had to retreat from the murderous aura that the divine guards emitted. After landing, Ouyang Shuo casually picked up an underwater breathing apparatus and kept it in his storage bag. Looking at the dilapidated civilization, Ouyang Shuo could not help but sigh. Could it be that no matter how great a civilization or how glorious an empire is, it can't escape the corrosion of time? Then what is the grand goal that he fought for his whole life compared to this? Ouyang Shuo's eyes inevitably showed a trace of confusion. Ouyang Shuo stood alone in the ruins of the city in a daze. However, the divine guard spontaneously spread out and guarded the marquee, ensuring that no one would hurt the marquee. At this moment, a whisper came from the empty ruins. "Welcome, fated person." The voice was hoarse, and there was wisdom in the vicissitudes of life. "Who?" Ouyang Shuo instantly woke up, and his eyes became sharp again. P.S. The update time has been unstable recently. Sheng Xiao is ashamed. I didn't want to say anything at first, but the recommendation votes are too low. Please vote more. Also, the monthly votes are ranked 9th. There's no improvement compared to last month. Please vote more. Thank you. Chapter 656. A man wearing a long robe and a spear walked out from behind the stone pillar. He wore a strange mask. The spear looked exactly the same as the spear held by the temple guards in the ruins. The carvings on the mask were of the same style as the carvings on the city stones. With Ouyang Shuo's knowledge, The style of the carvings was similar to the legendary Mayan civilization. It was obvious that the person in front of him was the Atlantean that Ouyang Shual was looking for. The strangest thing was that the masked man had a purple crystal the size of a thumb hanging around his neck. The crystal was octahedral and looked even more mysterious under the reflection of the seawater. The only pity was that the crystal itself was a little dim. Ouyang Shua's eyes narrowed. "Who are you? Why aren't you willing to show your face?" "Fated person, please follow me." The masked man didn't reply. He turned around and walked into the depths of the ruins. "Follow me," Ouyang Shua ordered decisively. Atlantis City had become the life-saving straw for the ocean fleet. Ouyang Shua had no choice. Following the masked man through the ruins of the city, Ouyang Shua was even more shocked. What he saw was only the tip of the iceberg. Magnificent temples, more exquisite statues, and taller stone pillars could be seen everywhere. Ouyang Shua saw a statue lying in the mud. Its head alone was more than 5 meters tall. It was quite terrifying. Ouyang Shua couldn't help but recall the concentric architectural style of Atlantis City. Obviously, they were walking deeper into the concentric circles. Even though it had collapsed into ruins, Atlantis City still maintained its strict hierarchy. After walking for an hour, they arrived in front of a majestic temple. The temple was located in the center of the concentric circles. It showed that this temple was extraordinary and had a supreme status. The overall architectural style of the temple was very similar to the Parthenon temple in Athens that Ouyang Shua had visited not long ago. Even the pillars and statues around the temple were similar. "Fated person, ask your guards to wait outside. Only you can go in now," the masked man said. Ouyang Shua hesitated for a moment and stopped Chen Dameng and the others from persuading him. He said in a low voice, "You guys wait outside. If you have time, search the ruins for underwater breathing devices or other items." Underwater breathing devices were good stuff. Ouyang Shua was too embarrassed to take them along the way. Now that there was an opportunity, he naturally didn't want to miss it. Other than the underwater breathing apparatus, the divine martial guards might be able to find other treasures. Yes, Chen Dameng nodded. Having been with the Marquis for a long time, Chen Dameng had a general understanding of the Marquis' style of doing things. He looked casual, but in fact he was extremely cautious. The fact that he asked them to stand guard outside meant that there would be no danger. Ouyang Shua brought Little Qing and followed the masked man into the temple. In the hall of the temple, there was a magnificent statue of a god. The god was tall and burly, with a face full of beard. He held a trident in his left hand and a huge conch in his right. "Poseidon!" Ouyang Shua exclaimed. "Woo!" When Little Qing saw the statue of Poseidon, it let out an unhappy provocation. "It's the sea god." The masked man casually glanced at Little Qing. As he spoke, he walked to the left side of the hall. There was a stone staircase leading down. The two sides of the stairs were dark, and the steps were covered with seaweed. If one was not careful, they would slip. Strangely, the deeper they went, the brighter the staircase became. The light seemed to come from underground. Ouyang Shua calculated in his mind. After walking for about 5.5 meters, an azure light screen suddenly appeared in front of them. It was overflowing with colorful lights and looked mysterious. The mysterious light screen blocked the seawater outside. Through the light screen, Ouyang Shua could vaguely see a city. Ouyang Shua was surprised. "This is our place of survival." The masked man's voice contained a trace of sorrow that could not be concealed. Ouyang Shua understood. They were buried in the depths of the sea, never to see the light of day, and spent countless years in loneliness. Such an ignoble existence was not a good thing for any civilization. Their bodies passed through the light screen without any obstruction. The scene in front of them stunned Ouyang Shua. They stood on a cliff and looked down. There were waterfalls, flowing springs, birds chirping, and flowers fragrant. It was a beautiful scene. Big and small blue lakes dotted the landscape. On the lakes, boats floated by. There were people on the boats, casting nets to catch fish. They looked happy. By the lake, there were beauties washing clothes and children playing. It was a happy and harmonious scene. Beautiful buildings were hidden among the green flowers. It was like a paradise. This scene was completely different from the lonely and decadent scene that Ouyang Shua had imagined. From this, it could be seen how powerful the ruler of Atlantis was. All the loneliness and pain were completely shouldered by the inheritor alone. For ordinary people, wasn't this paradise a good place to return to? Thinking of this, Ouyang Shua glanced at the masked man beside him. Ouyang Shua recognized the purple crystal hanging on the neck of the masked man. The person who held this crystal must be a core figure of the Atlantis race. Moreover, it must be a small part of the core. As if feeling Ouyang Shua's gaze, or perhaps because he had reached home, the masked man slowly took off his mask. Under the mask was a young woman. She had long red hair, big dark blue eyes, long eyelashes, three-dimensional and exquisite facial features, and thick lips that were filled with a different kind of temptation. Ouyang Shua was dumbstruck when he saw her. "Hello, I'm Kalia. Welcome to Atlantis." The beautiful woman's voice was crisp and sweet. The hoarse voice that she had at the beginning was just a disguise. Facing Kalia's white and tender palm, Ouyang Shua was slightly startled. He gently clenched and loosened his grip. "Hello, how can a mutant be naked? Sorry to disturb you." Kalia was undoubtedly a peerless beauty. Although her figure was covered by a long robe, it was obvious that she was extremely seductive with curves in all the right places. Coupled with the unique temperament of the Atlantis people, she was even more charming. Ouyang Shua was not an ordinary person. Beauty was just a layer of skin to him. He would appreciate it, but he would never indulge in it. His mind was already as firm as a rock. Kalia was surprised when she saw Ouyang Shua's clear eyes. Her beauty was also unique in her race. It was unknown how many men had been charmed by her. Since she was young, Kalia grew up in the sound of praises. This was the first time she saw someone indifferent to her beauty. Her eyes were filled with curiosity. "There are fewer and fewer fish in the lake. The lives of my people are getting more and more difficult. If this goes on, it will be difficult to continue living here in less than 10 years. Kalia looked at the city below the cliff with a lonely expression. "Don't worry, you won't have to wait for 10 years. You will be able to live on land immediately." Ouyang Shua comforted her. Hearing this, Kalia's eyes lit up. She put her palms together and said with a pious expression, "That's right. Thanks to the blessing of the sea god, we have finally met the fated person." Cough. Kalia's fiery gaze made Ouyang Shua a little uncomfortable. "What should we do now? Let's go. I will bring you down." "How do we go down?" Ouyang Shua was dumbfounded. They were standing on a cliff. Kalia smiled and went through a small door to the right side of the cliff. He saw that the entire place had been hollowed out and built into a spacious hall. In the hall, there was a shark-like skeleton, but it was not a shark. Ouyang Shua could clearly see the metallic luster of the skeleton. Obviously, this was a man-made metal skeleton. Just based on this exquisite skeleton, Ouyang Shua had a whole new level of respect for Atlantis technology. With Shanghai City's current industrial level, even if they had the blueprints, they wouldn't be able to manufacture it. When he got closer, the shark skeleton looked like an aircraft. It had wings on both sides and a cabin in the middle for people to sit in, but he didn't see any power system or any electronic equipment. Instead, the surface of the skeleton was engraved with complex carvings of the same style as the carvings on buildings. Presumably, this carving technique was one of the core technologies of the Atlantis civilization. It was widely used in buildings, accessories, machinery, and other fields. It was simply omnipotent. However, Korea didn't care about it. He sat in the driver's seat skillfully and inserted the purple crystal hanging around his neck into a groove in front. It fit perfectly and turned it to the left. Gotcha! The shark actually came to life and made a rumbling sound. The patterns on the surface of the shark flashed with blue light. The attentive Ouyang Shua noticed that when Kalia removed the purple crystal, the crystal became dimmer and dimmer. "It's really magical." Ouyang Shua sighed with emotion. Presumably, the crystal was the energy source that drove the shark. "Come in," Kalia called out to the dazed Ouyang Shua. Oh. Ouyang Shua got up and sat in the left cabin. The Shark aircraft was not big. It was similar to the fighter planes of World War II. It had a total of 2 seats. Sitting beside Kalia, Ouyang Shua faintly smelled a peculiar fragrance. It was the body fragrance of a young girl. It was probably Kalia's first time being so close to a man. A trace of red light flashed across his face. He controlled the Shark aircraft and slowly flew away from the cliff toward the city below. Looking down from the sky, Atlantis City was exquisite. But compared to the ruins of the underwater city, it was much smaller. It was estimated to be the size of a town. In the end, it's still a caged bird. Ouyang Shua somewhat understood the loneliness in Kalia's eyes. It was common sense for people to yearn for a free life. After all, no one really wanted to be trapped in such a small town for the rest of their lives and die alone. In less than 10 minutes, the aircraft stopped at the square of a castle in the center of the city. "This is our palace," Kalia introduced. Seeing Kalia walking unimpeded into the depths of the palace, Ouyang Shua's eyes flashed. This woman's identity was indeed not simple. No matter how much Atlantis City had declined, it was still a huge empire. Moreover, the hierarchy was strict. How could the palace be freely entered and exited? The only explanation was that Kalia was simply a member of the royal family. Perhaps she was a princess. A princess? It's very similar to a night novel. Ouyang Shua mocked himself. Chapter 657. The palace was unusually deserted. Other than a few guards in key positions, there was no one else. After passing through another palace, Ouyang Shua couldn't help but ask, "Kalia, are you the kingdom's princess?" Kalia paused, turned around, and said, "I was before." "Before?" Ouyang Shua was puzzled. "Half a year ago, my father passed away, and I succeeded the throne," Kalia said calmly. Ouyang Shua was speechless. So Kalia wasn't a princess, but the queen of Atlantis. "My condolences," Ouyang Shua said apologetically. Kalia smiled. "Father passed away peacefully. It's a kind of relief." Ouyang Shua was silent. In other words, the heavy burden of the Atlantis race was on the shoulders of this woman in front of him. No wonder Kalia's eyes were full of vicissitudes at such a young age. The two of them walked in silence and finally arrived at a hall deep in the palace. They didn't know where Kalia pressed a mechanism, but the floor of the hall slowly descended, and then they entered an underground cave. The cave was huge, and the end couldn't be seen. The dome was at least 20 meters high. The whole cave was dark and damp, and there was only a dazzling golden light in the center. In the middle of the cave, there was a golden pool with a length and width of 1 meter. The pool was flowing with a viscous golden liquid. It looked like it was about to dry up. A fist-sized golden crystal was suspended above the pool. The shape of the crystal was exactly the same as the purple crystal hanging around Kalia's neck. Just like the purple crystal, the golden crystal was also dim, as if it would fall into the water at any time. Even a corner of the light still illuminated the pool. The golden crystal was surrounded by irregular stone shields. The surface of the shields was carved with lifelike human faces. They were like guards, loyally guarding the golden crystal. Ouyang Shua roughly counted. There were 12 shields of different sizes. That's the golden magnetite stone, the energy source of our Atlantis civilization. 10,000 years ago, a disaster suddenly came to the empire. It was the magnetite stone that formed an energy barrier and protected this corner of the land. It was buried in the depths of the sea with the ruins of the city, Kalia explained. The magnetite stone is the lifeline of Atlantis. Is it also hanging around your neck? Ouyang Shua asked. That's right. Korea nodded. Magnetite can absorb sunlight and turn the energy of the universe into energy. From low to high, they could be divided into 5 grades: white, green, blue, purple, and gold. Low-grade magnetite stones are all derived from high-grade magnetite stones. From the looks of it, the situation with the golden magnetic isn't looking good. Ouyang Shua took the initiative to change the topic of the mission. At this time, Zheng He was leading the ocean-going fleet to contend with the Spanish fleet. Every moment that Ouyang Shua delayed meant that the ocean-going fleet would be in more danger. Korea's eyes dimmed. Not bad. The energy barrier formed by the magnetite ore consumes a lot of energy. After maintaining it for so long, no matter how strong the magnetite ore is, it can't hold on any longer. What can I do? Ouyang Shua asked. Yes. Korea nodded. Right at this moment, the sound of the system notification entered Ouyang Shua's ears. System notification. Congratulations to player, don't say you don't have clothes. You have officially activated the S-rank large-scale storyline mission, The Lost Atlantis. Mission background. 10,000 years ago, a huge tsunami and earthquake suddenly destroyed the city of Atlantis, causing it to sink to the bottom of the sea. Surprisingly, a small number of people survived under the protection of the Golden Magnetic Oregon mission requirement. Fill up the golden pool with golden liquid and recharge the Golden Magnetic Oregon. Raise the disappeared city of Atlantis to the surface of the sea and reappear in the world. Mission reward. Unknown. Friendly reminder. Players will receive different mission rewards if they choose different side missions. If the mission fails, there will be corresponding punishment. Please choose the side missions carefully. Side Mission 1. Complete the storyline mission alone. Upon completion, the reward will be 1 item of Atlantis top technology, 1 purple crystal, 50,000 achievement points, 150,000 reputation points, and other rewards. Side Mission 2. Share the storyline mission and invite other players to complete it together. Upon completion, the reward will be 1 item of Atlantis intermediate technology, 1 blue crystal, 10,000 achievement points, and 30,000 reputation points. Friendly reminder. If players choose the first side mission, failure will result in a deduction of 200,000 gold coins, 100,000 achievement points, and 300,000 reputation points. If the deduction is insufficient, the corresponding real-life achievement points will be deducted. If the real-life achievement points are insufficient, the deduction will be negative until the deduction is completed. If players choose the second side mission, failure will not result in any mandatory punishment. The difficulty of the 2 side missions was as different as heaven and earth. The mission rewards were also very different, and the punishment for failure was even more different. The former was high risk and high reward, while the latter was low risk and had a considerable reward. If one was not a crazy gambler, one would not choose the first side mission. It was obvious how difficult it was to complete an S-grade storyline mission alone. It was almost impossible. In his previous life, Vic had struggled for a long time. In the end, he gave up the temptation of the first side mission and chose the second side mission. If Ouyang Shua did not have the advantage of being reborn, he would not have chosen the first side mission, which was a risky option. Now it was different. He had the confidence to complete this side mission alone. Choose the first side mission, Ouyang Shua said without hesitation. System notification. Mission side mission selection has been completed. It can no longer be changed. As soon as the system notification ended, Korea continued as if he had received an instruction. The golden liquid in the pool is actually made of refined gold. 1 gold coin can only produce 5 drops of golden liquid. Even though Ouyang Shua was mentally prepared, he could not help but draw a gasp. According to standard titration, 1 liter of golden liquid contained 10,000 drops of golden liquid. It required 2,000 gold coins to refine. The pool in front of him was a meter in length, width, and depth. It could hold a cubic meter, which was 1,000 liters of golden liquid. In other words, it would take 2 million gold coins to fill the pond. At this stage in the world, Ouyang Shua was probably the only person who could fork out 2 million gold coins at once. It had to be said that Bic's choice in his previous life was very wise. It was no wonder that this storyline mission in his previous life had involved hundreds of thousands of players. It was almost impossible to fill up the pond with one's own strength. Ouyang Shua wanted to make the impossible possible. He was confident that Gaia would not release a mission that would cause players to suffer losses. With such a harsh setting, The rewards after completion would definitely be very generous. Got it. Ouyang Shuo nodded as he took out his storage bag and aimed it at the pool. Gold coins flowed out of the storage bag like flowing water, converging into a golden trickle. The moment the golden trickle entered the pool, it was refined into drops of golden liquid by a mysterious force. It began to flow at the bottom of the pool, glistening with golden light and exuding an oppressive sense of wealth. When Koreus saw this, his eyes lit up. In fact, with Atlantis's wealth, it was impossible for the treasury to not have 2 million gold coins. Even if they did not have it, they could slowly gather it at the bottom of the sea in 10,000 years. It was unknown how many shipwrecks were at the bottom of the vast sea, or how much wealth was buried with the shipwrecks in the depths of the seabed. No one cared about it. The Atlanteans had underwater breathing apparatus. As long as they were patient, they could probably flip through the entire Mediterranean Sea, including the Red Sea, in 10,000 years. Unfortunately, the gold coins of the natives were ineffective against the pool. Gaia's setting was purely to give players a difficult problem. If they chose side mission 2, not only would the participating players need to obtain an underwater breathing apparatus, they would also have to go through all sorts of trials to reach the land of survivors of Atlantis. Once they reached the land of survivors, they would have to constantly complete daily missions and farm Atlantis favorability points to obtain the permission to enter and exit the palace. Only then would the players be qualified to throw gold coins into the golden pool. Gaia's setting was firstly to increase the players' participation in the storyline missions, and secondly, to use this opportunity to publicize the vanished Atlantean civilization. At the same time, it was a warning to future generations. After all, human civilization was a thing of the past Earth. Perhaps their generation would be the 5th generation of humans on Earth. After tens of thousands of years, when Earth's magma eruption was over and it cooled down, it would once again be filled with vitality. When that time came, perhaps humans would once again appear on Earth and become the new rulers of Earth. When that time came, the traces they left on Earth would be seen by the new generation of humans as an ancient civilization. It would become a myth and legend that could not be verified. The golden trickle was endless, flowing without end. Ouyang Shuo looked at the number of gold coins on the attribute panel. It kept increasing at an indiscernible speed, but he felt a rare sense of calm. No matter how he tried to persuade him to stay, 2 million gold coins had to be spent. In Friendship City, Ouyang Shuo had spent 1 million gold coins. In Atlantis, he had spent another 2 million gold coins. As such, there was only 1 million gold coins left in his storage bag. It was as the saying goes, money comes quickly, but it is also quickly spent. Under the injection of massive amounts of gold coins, the golden liquid filled the pool at a speed visible to the naked eye. The water level kept rising, and waves of golden mist rose. The golden magnetite ore above the pool immediately activated its whale swallowing mode. Like a high-powered suction fan, it sucked in large amounts of golden mist. The dim magnetite ore slowly emitted a dazzling luster, becoming more and more dazzling. The shield surrounding the golden magnetite ore seemed to be pulled by some mysterious force. The patterns on its surface began to light up as it constantly rotated around the magnetite oregon. The further it went, the faster the shield rotated. Towards the end, Ouyang Shuo could no longer see the shadow of the magnetite oregon. All he could see was the increasingly dazzling golden light emitting from the center of the shield, shooting straight into the sky. Chapter 658. Just as Ouyang Shuo was spending money like water, Zheng He's fleet encountered a huge problem. On the 26th of July, at the Strait of Gibraltar, Malaga City, the Spanish territory closest to the port of Gibraltar, took only one night to reach its destination. The mighty fleet, however, failed to find anything at the port. Looking at the empty port, the soldiers looked at each other in dismay. Damn cowards! The one who spoke was a black-bearded captain named Juan, who was also one of the most powerful lords in southern Spain. Juan led his troops to rush here overnight, hoping to seize the first merit and lead his troops in the first battle of the national war. How could he have expected such a situation to occur? Is EF asterisk king messing with us? He initiated a national war and ran away before the war even started. Shameless. Sir, what should we do now? The first officer asked cautiously. Juan looked at the empty port, and a trace of slyness flashed in his eyes. He chuckled. The enemy ran away, and I'm going to get the first merit in this national war. Everyone, charge into the port and recover the port of Gibraltar in one go. Understood. The first officer snickered. Just like that, we went through hardships and killed the enemy bravely, and finally destroyed the Shanghai City fleet and recovered the port of Gibraltar. When the news spread to the forum, the whole nation naturally rejoiced. The #1 lord in the world? Haha, what a joke. The invincible fleet is invincible. The forum was filled with unbridled mockery of the Shanghai City fleet and blind worship of the invincible Spanish fleet. Some players even spread the news internationally, attracting the attention of other countries in the Mediterranean Sea. The Shanghai City fleet occupied the port of Gibraltar? That can't be. Greece, Italy, and other countries had conducted trade with the fleet before, so they didn't believe it. Haha, the stupid Easters are going to lose face this time. There are also people who were gloating. Arrogant Spaniards. There were also people who were dissatisfied with the Spaniards. The Spaniards considered themselves to be the masters of the Mediterranean Sea. So how could the other countries be happy? Throughout all the major battles of Shanghai City, they have never surrendered so easily. In my opinion, the fleet must have set up an ambush, waiting for the Spaniards to be humiliated. Agreed. The Spaniard celebration was too hasty and short. At about 9 o'clock in the morning, the ocean-going fleet set out. Zheng He adopted guerrilla tactics and attacked from all directions, either raiding or ambushing, causing a lot of trouble for the Spanish fleet. One after another, Spanish warships were sunk by the ocean-going fleet, causing the Spanish to gnash their teeth in hatred. The Spaniard felt that he had lost face and was even angrier. Among them, the most furious was naturally Lord Juan, who swore to destroy the ocean-going fleet. The Spaniards were not fools. After suffering a loss, they immediately changed their tactics and no longer acted alone. The unified Spanish fleet patrolled the Strait of Gibraltar in groups, continuously reducing the range of activities of the ocean-going fleet. As such, the situation of the ocean-going fleet suddenly became very difficult. Left with no choice, Zheng He could only gather the 4 naval battalions once again to prevent the Spanish fleet from destroying them one by one. In the end, he could only rely on his speed to contend with his opponent. The ruins of Atlantis, a place of survival. The golden light in the underground Kars cave was getting brighter and brighter, and the golden liquid in the pool was about to fill up. The moment the pool was filled, the 12 shields protecting the golden magnetite were suddenly dispersed, revealing the true body of the golden magnetite, Oregon. It was as dazzling as a golden sun. Seeing this, Korea took a step forward, and the purple crystal hanging around her neck automatically floated up. She put her palms together and closed her eyes, as if she was communicating with the golden magnetite, Oregon. Could it be that this stone actually has spirituality? Ouyang Shuo was bewildered. After a while, the golden magnetite shone brightly and suddenly burst open. The entire Kars cave was filled with warm and dazzling golden light. It seemed to contain some kind of mysterious power that made people want to worship it. Even Korea was already prostrating on the ground. Ouyang Shuo's eyes narrowed, and he operated the inner cannon of the Yellow Emperor to forcibly resist the pressure. He was a lord, a marquis, and a hero of his generation. How could he worship a stone? As if feeling Ouyang Shuo's resistance, the golden light that enveloped Ouyang Shuo emitted an even stronger pressure, wanting to subdue Ouyang Shuo, this anomaly. Ouyang Shuo felt a tremendous force pressing down on his body from all directions. In particular, the pressure coming from the top of his head was getting stronger and stronger, as if Mount Tai was pressing down on him. Beads of sweat ceaselessly seeped out from Ouyang Shuo's forehead. Ouyang Shuo clenched his teeth tightly, and he used his absolute will to resist this pressure. However, the more he resisted, the more the golden light didn't intend to let him go. The pressure ceaselessly increased, and it pressed down on Ouyang Shua to the point that the bones in his entire body were cracking. Ouyang Shua clenched his teeth, and he couldn't bear it any longer. He suddenly sat down cross-legged, and the golden true essence circulated madly within his body. His meridians were similarly flickering with a golden light. His meridians that were continuously baptized by the dragon veins spirit chi on the nameless island were completely radiating with the toughness and vitality of a cockroach under this pressure. His boundless potential was swiftly transforming into actual strength. Under this pressure, the golden true essence within Ouyang Shua's body became more and more condensed and more vigorous. The speed of his cultivation of the inner canon of the Yellow Emperor was increasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Ouyang Shua, however, didn't have a trace of happiness in his heart. Because the pressure from the golden light was still increasing, the bones in Ouyang Shua's body emitted a sound that was like frying beans, and it was extremely shocking. If he continued to resist like this, Ouyang Shua would definitely be squeezed into a ball of meat paste. Submit to me. Perhaps it was an illusion, but a wispy whisper seemed to enter Ouyang Shua's ears. Absolutely not. Ouyang Shua's eyes were crimson red, and his expression was ferocious. The dignity of a king can't be blasphemed. After the golden true essence, the fiend god bloodline within his body was completely mobilized by Ouyang Shua as well. Strands of the aura of the black god rose from within Ouyang Shua's body, and he attempted to use pressure to resist the golden light. The black bloodline and the golden true essence within Ouyang Shua's body reflected each other's brilliance. This was the first time that Ouyang Shua had mobilized two completely different types of energy within his body at the same time, and it was also the first time that these two energies fought side by side against a formidable enemy. Black and gold were so harmonious. It was even to the extent that the two of them started to move closer to each other and fuse with each other. If he was able to fuse these two energies together in one go, it would undoubtedly be an enormous fortuitous encounter for Ouyang Shua. Unfortunately, this fusion was extremely difficult. Sometimes they would gather together, and sometimes they would separate. If this continued, it would probably take more than a day. The golden light obviously didn't intend to give Ouyang Shua this time. Seeing that it still couldn't subdue this person, the golden magnetic stone was somewhat angry, and the pressure it exerted tripled. The sky and the earth were vast and boundless, as if there was no end to them. The sky was covered with golden clouds, but the earth was black as if it was cast from steel. Between heaven and earth, there was only Ouyang Shua alone. The golden clouds continued to press down, toppling the mountains and overturning the seas and swallowing the mountains and rivers. Ouyang Shua's feet stepped on the earth, and his hands held up the sky as he let out an unyielding roar. The golden sky continued to press down, and Ouyang Shua's spine was bent from the pressure. However, the earth beneath his feet didn't move at all, allowing him to bear the pressure of heaven and earth alone. Ouyang Shua raised his head and looked around. All he saw was golden clouds all around him. The low and thick golden clouds made one feel suffocated, and it made one feel despair. It was as if there wasn't a trace of hope to escape. Cough. In an instant, Ouyang Shua suffered internal injuries. He coughed out a mouthful of fresh blood, and his face instantly turned deathly pale. Damn it! Ouyang Shua wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth, and his face was gloomy. He didn't expect that just when he was about to succeed, such an unforeseen event would occur. Could it be that Guya added an additional test for me because I completed the mission too easily? Ouyang Shua frowned. It was impossible for him to surrender. Even if he had to risk failing the mission and suffer the punishment of failure, he wouldn't allow himself to worship a stone. Queen Kalia was also a king, And the reason why he could worship a stone was because the magnetite stone was the totem of the Atlanteans. To Ouyang Shua, it was just a tool that provided him with energy. There's no other way. I can only give it one last try. Ouyang Shua calmed his mind and sank into his consciousness. He concentrated on connecting with the Dragon of Providence. At this moment, the only thing that could help him resist the pressure was the mysterious and unfathomable Dragon of Providence. In the sky above the seabed, amidst the clouds that stretched for thousands of miles, a giant dragon that was half red and half purple, that stretched for tens of miles, slowly opened its sleeping eyes. Its deep and serene gaze looked towards the depths of the seabed below the clouds. Roar! A dragon's roar sounded between heaven and earth. Immediately, a powerful dragon's might passed through thousands of miles of the void and descended on Ouyang Shua. Under this dragon's might, the golden light that enveloped Ouyang Shua instantly exploded. Phew! Ouyang Shua heaved a long sigh of relief. His sweat poured down like rain. The golden light retreated and wanted to condense again. At this moment, Kalia was awakened by the dragon's roar. When he saw Ouyang Shua's pale face, he immediately understood. Kalia was shocked. He put his palms together and communicated with the golden magnetite stone again. He didn't know what Kalia said, but the golden light enveloped Ouyang Shua again. The strange thing was that Ouyang Shua didn't feel the pressure anymore. The golden light seeped into Ouyang Shua's body. In an instant, his internal injuries were healed. It could even be said that his consumed true origin was immediately restored. When Ouyang Shua saw this, he stopped circulating the inner canon of the Yellow Arch and the demonic god's bloodline. He woke up from his meditation and looked at the golden magnetite stone floating above the pool with a complicated expression. This time, it could be considered as a blessing in disguise. The problem was that Ouyang Shua didn't want to experience such a test again. After the interlude, the upheaval continued. The golden light pierced through the dome and rushed up to the clouds. Suddenly, the entire surviving area was shrouded in the golden light. Under the golden light, the surviving area became like heaven. At the same time, the magnetic magnetite stone hanging on the necks of every Atlantean emitted light at the same time. They were green, blue, and even purple. It was dazzling and colorful. Divine revelation. Like Kalia, all the Atlanteans knelt on the ground. Their expressions were devout and joyful. They felt that the opportunity for their race to rise again was right in front of them. The golden light didn't stop. It broke through the sky again, passing through the energy barrier that protected the surviving area and expanding rapidly. In less than 10 minutes, the entire ruins of Atlantis were shrouded in the golden light. Under the nourishment of the golden light, the mysterious carvings on the surface of the countless large and small buildings in the ruins came to life. The blue light formed mysterious patterns. Immediately, the corals and seaweeds attached to the surface of the buildings were annihilated. Even dust, mud, and all other unclean things were excluded from the ruins and no longer existed. The ruins of the entire city suddenly looked brand new. The sea god temple in the center of the city burst out a dazzling blue light, deep and blue. The sea god statue suddenly became lifelike. Only the broken pillars and the statues that were missing arms and legs told of the tragedy that had befallen the city. The divine martial guards guarding outside the sea god temple were shocked when they saw this scene. Fortunately, Kalia seemed to have told them that the golden light didn't have any malicious intent toward them. It didn't even release any pressure. Deep under the sea, the dazzling golden light turned the blue sea into a golden sea. Suddenly, a rumbling sound came from deep under the sea. It was as if the earth was shaking and the mountains were shaking. The entire ruins were shaking, and it was getting more and more intense. All the golden light that filled the ruins suddenly converged toward the center of the city, gathered into a beam, and suddenly spread out, forming a huge golden ball that enveloped the entire ruins. At the same time, every Atlantean, including the divine martial guards, had a golden bubble appear around them, protecting them in the bubble. The shaking coming from deep under the ground was getting more and more intense. The land at the edge of the ruins continued to split apart, forming ghastly trenches. The trenches were getting wider and deeper. The cracks, which were dozens of meters wide, were a ghastly sight. Boom! A loud noise came from the deepest part of the sea, like a thunderclap. Creak! Then there was a strange sound like chopping bamboo. It was the sound of the roots of the ley line breaking. Just like that, the Atlantean ruins were finally separated from the bottom of the sea. After 10,000 years of evolution, the ruins had long been closely connected to the seabed continent. This break immediately caused a huge tsunami. The seawater was like a ferocious beast, pouring toward the roots of the ley line. A huge whirlpool with a diameter of more than 1,000 meters appeared on the surface of the sea. If a ship passed by at this time, it would definitely not be spared. The tsunami caused by deep under the ground was getting bigger and bigger, and the entire Strait of Gibraltar was affected. In the sea, whether it was the ocean fleet or the Spanish fleet, in the face of such a tsunami, they could only struggle like babies and no longer had the will to fight. Boom! Another earth-shattering noise. Atlantis, which had been silent for 10,000 years, was about to appear in front of the world again. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.